of its former president, Jacob Zuma's disciplinary hearing to a date yet to be announced. Zuma was due to appear before the ANC's National Disciplinary Committee tomorrow for allegedly violating the party's constitution. Zuma was suspended earlier this year following his endorsement of the new Umkhonto weSizwe party. The ANC Secretary-General Fikile Mbalula addressed the media in Johannesburg yesterday.
No, we said the NDC must stand in abeyance, including virtual, till after elections. We don't expect anything to take place on Tuesday, as the instruction has been communicated.
Meanwhile, the MK party is adamant its members will still descend on the ANC headquarters at Luthuli House in Johannesburg tomorrow, despite the postponement of Zuma's disciplinary hearing. The MK party spokesperson Nhlamulo Ndlela.
We will be there as far as we're concerned. We're there by invite. The ANC invited us over, and they knew very well that wherever President Zuma is, we'll be there to support him. So, for them to also refer to a provocation of some sort, the mere fact that they can request President Zuma's presence at Luthuli House, for their kangaroo court DC, before the elections is absurd. So, they brought this upon themselves, and President being, one person who's not a coward would definitely be there. So, and in person. So, and that's where we're at. That's where we stand.
In election-related news, the former ANC Deputy President David Mabuza says the party will survive despite the formation of the MK party. The MK party has intensified its campaigning in recent weeks, particularly in KwaZulu-Natal and Gauteng. Mabuza was campaigning in Centurion, Pretoria, ahead of the elections on the 29th of this month.
We've been through this journey before, like I told you. We went through the formation of COPE, which was very formidable in my take. EFF, not really formidable. MK, not really formidable in my take. We will survive this one.
The president of the South African Council of Churches, the Archbishop Thabo Makgoba, says the administration that will take office after the May 29th elections must address the needs of South Africans, especially the poor. He was delivering a sermon during the National Day of Prayer for Elections at the Grace Bible Church in Pimville in Soweto yesterday. Makgoba says the new leadership should consist of patriotic people.
We remind ourselves that having voted, we still need to hold that mirror before ourselves and before the politicians and before everybody that makes South Africa work and be most loving, to say, how do we roll up our sleeves and meet the needs, particularly of the poorest of the poor? How do we make people safe? It is our prayer that as the new cabinet and the new parliament is inaugurated, it will be characterized by people who love themselves, who love this country, and who love God.
And finally, the Israeli military says 3 of its soldiers have been killed and several others wounded in a Hamas rocket attack on one of the main crossings used to deliver aid to Gaza. The military has since closed Karem Shalom. Palestinian health officials say subsequently Israeli airstrikes killed 16 people in southern Gaza. The BBC's Julian Bedford has more.
The prospect for a ceasefire in Gaza had dwindled before Hamas fired 10 missiles towards the Karem Shalom crossing. But the deadly attack has resulted in an increase in violence, and latest strikes on Rafah has seen several civilian deaths.
Recapping the top story, the ANC has cited security concerns as the reason for the postponement of its former president, Jacob Zuma's disciplinary hearing to a date yet to be announced. For SFM News, I am Anne Musa.
A very good morning to you in your SFM Sports headlines. It's soccer. Mamelodi Sundowns set for the Nedbank Cup final after their 2-1 win over Stellenbosch last night. And turning to rugby, SA Rugby, they shone at the South African Sports Awards, claiming 7 accolades. We'll catch more details just before 6:30.
SAFM, guiding you through the rush hour traffic.
Busy in terms of volume coming into Pretoria this morning. The Montpellier Highway queuing to Westgate and Perth Valley. Paul Kruger at Capital Park busy again this morning. We've seen Paul Kruger in the morning time towards Pretoria just get busier over the last few weeks, and it's already queuing up. The Mike 1 on your way to Joburg, queuing between Boysons and Crown. Looks like something's happened before you get into the Crown area. Durban side, a pedestrian down on Victoria Embankment. The Esplanade going in just before Samora Michelle. So watch for some delays around that. EMS on scene. Cape Town off to a pretty good start, although if you drive out of Mitchell's Plain, there's already some busy conditions just looping around this closure of the M7 Jake Scovell Drive. Jake Scovell Drive effectively closed between Morgansteer Road in the north and Spine Road in the south. I'm Rob Byrne. SAFM Sunrise starts now.
SAFM Sunrise. A vivid start to your day.
6 minutes after 6. Hey, good morning. Welcome to SAFM Sunrise. I'm Stephen Grootes. Glad you're with us this Monday morning. 3 and a bit something until the elections. 3 and a bit weeks until the elections is the phrase I was using. I knew there was a word missing there. How was your weekend? I know 1 or 2 people who managed to dash away for a quick, quiet weekend with family. They come back looking refreshed. I know others who spent most of it working, actually. And I know plenty of others who just took the opportunity to just relax a little bit. More and more you see politicians everywhere, more and more posters everywhere ahead of the election as well, of course, and all sorts of developments. Things getting going a little bit for the election. I think things are beginning to move sort of quite quickly now. Anyway, I hope you managed to have some rest. I think that we're entering a busy period, and I always kind of feel as it starts to get darker later, earlier in the evening, as it starts to get lighter later in the morning, that this is kind of the part of the year where you have to do, the hard work, the hard graft, the hard whatever it is. This is the part of the year where really everything gets done during the sort of winter period. I've seen some predictions, by the way, that it won't be a very intense winter period, that it'll be slightly warmer than winters we've seen. And there's El Nino and La Nina to thank for that. But let's see. I mean, obviously things can change as we go. So a busy weekend for politics and religion. The SA Council of Churches holding a very important event last night. I think at the Grace Bible Church, I think it was. And they had, there's a sort of interfaith prayer, if you like, a big movement to pray for peace for the elections. Now, the South African Council of Churches saying they're praying for free and fair elections as well. The DA leader, John Steenhuisen, was there. Bantu Holomisa was there. Herman Mashaba was there. Musia Lakota was there. The Gauteng Premier, the ANC's Panyaza Lesufi, he was there too. So other people were there. And Claudia Motsoeneng, I think, was there too, leader of the African Content Movement. These basically a sort of show of sort of unity, if you like. And we see this kind of thing in the run-up to our elections. I think it's very important. I mean, I don't think you would see that in the United States, by the way. I don't think you'd see Donald Trump and Joe Biden attending a ceremony like that necessarily before the elections. Maybe, but not that I can see ahead of their elections. We managed to do this kind of thing still very well, I think, very important. And so everyone coming together and sort of praying for the same thing. President Cyril Ramaphosa, he was on the campaign trail yesterday at the Reformed Apostolic Mission of Southern Africa Church in Gugulethu in the Western Cape. He was saying that, the church has never abandoned the ANC, always supported the ANC. He was also talking about jobs, saying when the ANC came into power in South Africa, there were 8 million jobs in the formal sector. They're now around 16 million jobs. So he's saying they've done well. I don't know if everyone sees it like that. He may well have a different view on that if you look at our jobs crisis. But certainly you have politicians and religious leaders sort of being intertwined in a way. And in fact, your mediated conversation later is the role religion should play, if any, in our politics and how that works. I think it's a really interesting conversation to have and a really important conversation to have. Julius Malema also on the campaign trail yesterday. He was talking about land. He said we'll get the land back in our lifetime, was the way that he put it. And talking about how important that is, and linking land, I think, to self-respect, and also sort of making campaign promises that you'll have seen over the last little while, talking about jobs as well during the election yesterday. Other events over the weekend, and of course we're going to have more on this through the morning, I think, but former President Jacob Zuma. So it was a little confusing yesterday. At one point it seemed to go like this, that the hearing was going to go ahead was where we left things on Tuesday. That it was going to go ahead tomorrow. It's disciplinary hearing within the ANC now. Then we were told that it was going to be postponed until after the election. Then an instruction from the disciplinary committee seemed to emerge saying that the hearing was going to go ahead but would be virtually. And then Fikile Mbalula held a press conference, the Secretary General of the ANC, and said no, it will only happen after the election. And so it does now seem to only be happening after the election. Meanwhile, Mkhonto Sizwe, their spokesperson, Ntlamulo Ntlela, telling the SABC over the weekend that their supporters will still be outside Letuli House tomorrow to show their support for Zuma. Which means, if I understand this correctly, and maybe this is a comment about our politics, is that you're going to have the supporters of one party supporting their leader outside the headquarters of another party, because he's also a member of that party, protesting about something that isn't actually happening at the headquarters at the time. I think I've got that right. I don't know. It's a very confusing situation, very sort of strange situation in a way. The oil company Shell, and I'm sure wherever you move around this morning, you'll probably see one of their filling stations. It now appears they're planning to leave South Africa, sell their assets and leave South Africa. They've been here since 1902, by the way. It sort of tells you something about the oil industry, doesn't it? That companies last for so long, the sort of seven majors, as they're often called. I don't know if they're still seven. And this seems to have sparked a big fight with their BEE partner, Tebe Investments. And that deal, by the way, goes back over 20 years, Shell and Tebe Investments. And it's hard for me to work out why Shell want to leave. In fact, we'll speak to Jimmy Moyaha, our business show host, a little later, because I think he'll shed some light on it, and I'm sure Ntaleng will have more to say about it as well. Whether Shell are leaving because of the fight over BEE, or if Shell are leaving for other reasons, and that sparked the fight with BEE partner. That seems to me to be the case, and it's about, whether they produce crude here anymore, which I think they don't because of the Zatref refinery. It's very complicated. There's a lot that goes on behind the scenes in the oil industry, I think. And so I think there are all sorts of things, but it does look like there's going to be a little bit of a dispute there, which is unfortunate. And then also over the weekend, Judge Sisi Khampepe, a former Constitutional Court judge, she has been dealing with the Isindiso Commission. She's the chair of it, and they released the first part of their findings yesterday. And this is where 77 people died in that Marshalltown fire, that terrible, terrible situation. She said the city of Johannesburg was partly to blame, didn't enforce bylaws, went back to the fact that in 2019 there'd been a raid there and it had been found that people were ignoring bylaws. And she's also recommended action. I thought this was interesting. She's recommended action against the CEO of the Johannesburg property company, Helen Poorters, because she must have known of the problems. So officially she knew of the problems there. The company was being run by the building was being run by the Johannesburg property company, and nothing had been done to stop all of the problems. And I know, and I can see the arguments, if I were the Joburg property company, and I don't speak for them, I'd say, but you take action, you try and remove people, you get stopped by the courts, etc. It's a very messy situation there, very sort of difficult situation. So very interesting to see how that's going to play out. But they want disciplinary action against Helen Poorters, and I thought that was very interesting. I wonder how that is going to play out. A little later, by the way, because I think there's still problems with the power in some parts of the Joburg CBD, we'll actually be speaking to City Power. They now want the South African National Defence Force to come in and help protect their assets. That's how serious this is. We've spoken to Isaac Magena, we've spoken to other people about this, how often their assets are basically under attack there, and it seems the police are just unable to do anything, so very important. Good to hear from you this morning. You know the number, 086 000 2032, SMS 41391. You tweet SFM Radio and at Stephen Grootes. Send your WhatsApp voice notes to 0614 104 107. Good morning. It's really good to have you along this morning. It's 14 minutes after 6.
EFC is live this Thursday. Two grappling wizards will battle it out for the vacant welterweight title at EFC 113 as Gelson Souza and Zakir Banat fight it out for championship glory. Plus, Faiz Jacobs is out for revenge against the great Sylvester Chipumbu for number one contendership. EFC 113 live this Thursday. Watch it on SABC Sport Channel on DTT Channel 4 from 7 p.m. Brought to you by SABC Sport.
For credible and comprehensive coverage of South Africa's fast-moving mining industry and the people shaping it, click through to Creamer Media's Mining Weekly. From policy and innovation to market-moving trends, Creamer Media's Mining Weekly keeps your finger on the resources pulse. For even deeper insight, subscribe to our new look weekly magazine, out every Friday, together with engineering news. Creamer Media's Mining Weekly. Current, credible, comprehensive.
Any person aggrieved by any political advertisement or political election broadcast that is broadcast by SAFM may lodge a complaint within 5 days from broadcast with the Independent Communications Authority of South Africa, ICASA. To lodge your complaint, please contact ICASA's Compliance Department via telephone number on 012-568-3233. That's 012-568-3233. Or email broadcastingcompliance@icasa.org.za. That's broadcastingcompliance@icasa.org.za. Alternatively, complaintsccc@icasa.org.za. That's complaintsccc@icasa.org.za. The Daily News Diary on SAFM.
And Musa, good morning. How are you doing this morning?
I'm well, thank you. Yourself?
I'm all right, thanks. I'd ask if you got any rest over the weekend, but one glance at the news agenda, you can see how things are busy again.
A very busy weekend and campaigning all the way.
Indeed. What's coming up today?
So this morning we're looking into the Gampepe Commission of Inquiry report that was released into the building fire in Johannesburg that found the city of Johannesburg and its entities are liable for the deaths of 77 residents. Reaction following the announcement by the ANC that Jacob Zuma's disciplinary hearing has been postponed to a date yet to be announced. And the MK party, however, saying that they are adamant that its members will descend on the ANC's headquarters in Johannesburg tomorrow, regardless of that announcement of the postponement. And we are drawing closer to the elections, lots of political parties intensifying their campaign trails. And yesterday we saw the former ANC Deputy President David Mabuza campaigning in Centurion, and this week the ANC's NEC is expected to kick off a week of campaigning in KwaZulu-Natal. We had the IFP President Velinkosini Hlabisa was out in Ilembe calling on residents there to use the power of the vote to remove the current governing party, which is the ANC, from office. And then the EFF leader Julius Malema, who addressed residents of Kutsong in the West Rand, saying giving land to black people should be seen as restoring their dignity and also giving them hope. Then we're looking at the preparation for coverage of elections abroad, with the Electoral Commission announcing the final preparations for voting by citizens out of country, and it comes following the closure of applications for special votes abroad. Voting out of country will take place in 111 foreign missions, and it will take place on the 17th of May, which is the Friday, in 9 countries, and the rest of the other countries will vote on the 18th of May, which is the Saturday. We also looking at calls by AMCU for investigations of mine fatalities to be expedited, and it comes after the Department of Mineral Resources revealed that reports on the findings, recommendations, as well as any remedial steps have not been finalized. It is with regards to that mine accident that claimed 13 lives in November last year at Impala Platinum Shaft 11. And just lastly, a case of a bogus lawyer and his 4 co-accused will resume for a bail application in the Nelspruit Regional Court this morning, and they are facing charges of fraud and impersonating an attorney. And this, the accused Tsepo Mahlaku and his company were the 4 accused allegedly defrauded 15 family estates money, which amounted to about 15 million rand.
A lot going on as always. And Musa, thank you very much indeed. We'll be listening on the radio 19 minutes now after 6.
Stephen Grootes on SAFM.
Let's have a look at your weather around the country this morning. Tshwane fine, a low of 9, a high of 28. Johannesburg fine, 7 and 26. Vereeniging fine, 6 and 27. Bombela fine, 11 and 31. Polokwane fine, 9 and 29. Mahikeng fine, 9 and 28. Vryburg fine, 7 and 28. Mangaung fine, 6 and 26. Kimberley fine, 11 and 28. Uppington fine, 12 and 28. Cape Town cloudy, becoming partly cloudy, a moderate to fresh northerly wind, 14 and 21. George partly cloudy in the early morning, otherwise fine, a moderate easterly wind, 10 and 27. Gqeberha fine, becoming cloudy in the evening, a light southwesterly wind, 14 and 24. East London today fine, becoming cloudy in the afternoon, a moderate northerly wind, 15 and 31. eThekwini fine, a moderate northeasterly wind, 18 and 30. Richards Bay fine, a moderate to fresh northeasterly, 18 and 32. And Pietermaritzburg fine, 13 and 29.
Worldview
update, bringing you closer to international or global news.
20 minutes after 6 this morning, due to get an update for you on the situation in the Middle East about what's been happening there and how difficult the situation is. Also, of course, more to come on that in just a moment. Also, we'll be hearing more about retrenchments, concerns about retrenchments in the last little while, with various issues, of course, both in the mining sector and in the South African Post Office. All right, well, let's look abroad now. 20 minutes after 6 in Israel, authorities raiding the offices of the television network Al Jazeera after a decision by the country's government to shut down the network's operations in that country. Some officials have claimed Al Jazeera is a mouthpiece of Hamas. Meanwhile, Al Jazeera says it's done nothing wrong. It's condemned the decision by Israel and said 140 Palestinian journalists have died while covering Israel's offensive in Gaza. Al Jazeera is funded by Qatar. Qatar is sponsoring the peace talks between Israel and Hamas. Naeem Jina is a senior researcher at the Mapungubwe Institute for Strategic Reflection. Naeem, good morning.
Good morning, Stephen.
In a way, this is not so much about the decision to shut down a television network. I suppose it's really about the symbolism. What signal does this send about Israel to the rest of the world?
Well, for one thing, it's kind of vaunted democracy and freedoms that it claims. This proves that all of that is not entirely correct. But it's also the attempt to ensure that they want to control the narrative. They're losing that control of the narrative. I mean, what has happened over the past 6 months in terms of global opinion about Israel has been something that has been unprecedented. The protests, we've seen protests now in the U.S., but all around the world. And part of the reason for that is that people are seeing the Gaza genocide unfold in front of their eyes. It's not just Al Jazeera, of course. Much of it is social media. But clamping down on one network means that you try to intimidate others. So it's that attempt. Then the last angle is what you just said at the end of your introduction, Stephen. Al Jazeera belongs to the government, to the state that is sponsoring the peace talks, ceasefire talks between the two sides. So what message does it send to Qatar, which is sponsoring that, about what Israel believes should happen in terms of peace in Gaza? Is kind of up in the air.
I mean, could Qatar even sort of try and pull out of the peace talks? I mean, this is surely going to affect Israel's relationship with Qatar. I mean, it does all sorts of things, this decision.
Sure. I mean, this is not the first time, of course. You might remember a couple of weeks ago, the Qatari foreign minister who's leading the mediation efforts made a statement that Qatar was going to pull out. And that was because it was continually being maligned by Israel, which said that it was sponsoring Hamas, etc., etc. They didn't pull out ultimately. But after the decision yesterday about Al Jazeera, an American delegation went to Qatar to have talks with them. Obviously, to say to them, don't take this too badly. Don't take it personally. Don't pull out of the peace talks, etc. Because Qatar really is, its role is very important if we want these talks to reach any kind of conclusion. So on the same day, these two things happened: the Al Jazeera, that visit by the American delegation, and also the talks taking place in Cairo. Not reaching any kind of conclusion with the Israelis saying that there's no way that they're going to accept a permanent ceasefire. So all of those are bound up together in some way.
You made the point about how the sort of global discussion around Israel's actions in Gaza has changed over the last 6 months. We see that with the protests happening in the United States, unimaginable, a year ago. That doesn't necessarily mean that attitudes in Israel are changing. And let me try and put the question in this way. Is the difference in the attitudes inside Israel and the attitudes outside Israel now maybe bigger than it's been for many, many years? What I'm trying to get to is that in Israel, attitudes are hardening. Without an Al Jazeera to provide a sort of alternative narrative, that process will continue. It's a sort of echo chamber. You remove one of the voices that gave you a different view on life. then your attitudes sort of tend to harden in a particular direction. So are the attitudes inside Israel and the attitudes outside Israel now bigger than they've been in many years?
Yeah, the divide between those two are.
Yes.
I mean, what we've seen over the past couple of decades now is that the Israeli politics and Israeli society have been moving further and further to the right, which ended up with the government that they now have. And that has increasingly been making that Israeli kind of political and public opinion more and more out of step with particularly the publics, not necessarily the governments in the rest of the world. But the past few months have really shown that up, with that public opinion within Israel going even further to the right, and the one outside becoming more and more anti-Israeli, or at least just critical of Israel. And the other kind of big interesting point about this is that outside of Israel, that anti-Israeli critical position, very prominent within that is Jews around the world, the US, South Africa, and other places. And that means that the divide between those two is not just between within Israel and outside Israel, but also Jews within Israel and Jews outside Israel.
And then very quickly, I mean, the next move, obviously, we're waiting for Israel to go further into Rafah than it already has. Is that the next move here?
They keep threatening that. The Americans keep wanting to hold them back. But, it seems that the Israelis are intent on not agreeing to anything that would prevent them from doing that. So the fear is quite real.
Naim Gina, thank you very much indeed. Really appreciate it. Senior researcher at the Mapungubwe Institute for Strategic Reflection. You with SAFM, 27 minutes after 6.
This is SAFM Sport with Zai Khan.
Zai, good morning.
Good morning.
Sundowns. So boring. Come on.
Yeah, that final spot in the Nedbank Cup, they've booked it smoothly like a cup of coffee in the morning. That was 2-1, the score over Stellenbosch FC last night. It was a semi-final match played at the Dani Craven Stadium. Now, Masandawana will join Orlando Pirates in the final, which is scheduled to be played at Mbombela Stadium on the 1st of June. The newly crowned DStv Premiership champion Sundowns will be away to Golden Arrows on the 8th of May. Stellies, on the other hand, saw their run in the South African FA Cup come to an end in the semi-finals for the second year running. Coach Steve Barker's side is scheduled to play host to Amazulu. That's also on the 8th of May. Elsewhere, Liverpool beat Tottenham 4-2 at Anfield to condemn the visitors to a fourth consecutive loss, which leaves their hopes of Champions League qualification hanging by a thread. For Liverpool, out of the title race in third place, the result is at least hopeful of a positive finish for Jurgen Klopp's final campaign in charge. Another match saw Chelsea producing a scintillating attacking performance, thrashing West Ham 5-0. And elsewhere, Bundesliga champions Bayer Leverkusen thrashing Eintracht Frankfurt 5-1. And they made it 48 matches unbeaten in all competitions. Xabi Alonso's men have just 2 league games remaining in their quest for an unbeaten campaign. SA Rugby dominated the 17th South African Sports Awards at Sun City, collecting 7 prestigious accolades. Fresh off their World Cup victory in France, the Springboks continued their winning streak. Siya Kolisi not only led the team to glory, but was also honoured twice as Sports Star of the Year and receiving the People's Choice Award. Jacques Ninaba was named Coach of the Year, with newcomer Mane Libbok and veteran Ibn Etzebeth taking home awards for newcomer and Sportsman of the Year, respectively. Mark Alexander was recognised as the Administrator of the Year, while the Springboks proudly claimed Team of the Year title. Springbok Malcolm Marx was there to collect the Team of the Year award.
Yeah, it's truly an honour to stand here and receive this award on behalf of the Springboks. A big thank you to the department for the nomination and the award. And I think a big thank you must go to the fans and the supporters that sent messages of encouragement to us throughout our journey. Thank you very much.
In other categories, sailor Kirsten Newshafer was named Sportswoman of the Year, with Simone Kruger and Mpumelelo Mhlongo honored for their contributions in para-athletics. Tennis action, Andrei Rublev overcame a virus to capture his second Masters 1000 title at the Madrid Open with a 4-6, 7-5, 7-5 comeback victory against Felix Auger-Aliassime. And finally, cricket, Tauhid Hidroy top scored with 37 as Bangladesh cruised to a 6-wicket win over Zimbabwe in the second T20 International in Chittagong yesterday, taking a 2-0 lead in the 5-match series. The hosts eased their way to 142 for 4 in 18.3 overs, defying rain and some inspirational bowling from Zimbabwe after restricting the visitors to 138 for 7. More sport at the top of the hour. I'm Zai Khan.
Zai, thanks very much indeed. We'll have more about the post office and the retrenchments there in the next half hour. You're the SFM leading the conversation Monday morning. Good morning, 6:30.
Good morning. In the headlines, the Kucha municipality in the Eastern Cape says it's concerned that the outbreak of the foot and mouth disease in Humansdorp could negatively affect the province's economy. The ANC has cited security concerns as the reason for the postponement of its former president, Jacob Zuma's disciplinary hearing to a date yet to be announced. And the president of the European Commission says she will address the need for fair competition with China when she meets with President Xi Jinping and the French president in Paris today. I'll have details on these and other stories at 7.
SAFM, guiding you through the rush hour traffic.
Good morning, crash at Galooly. The N12 and R24 routes coming in from the Ekurhuleni side are already badly backed up. The N12 pushing back towards Edenvale, the R24 pushing back to its Edenvale exit as well. Side roads open at this hour. Smith Street in Joburg's Braamfontein area closed at the Mike 1 Highway. The road was closed yesterday following the fire, the big fire that happened there recently. It was on last Wednesday, wasn't it, the fire? So Smith Street is now closed down. That's going to cause some problems. That's a really busy link between sort of Braamfontein and the city centre. So will have an impact on the Mike 1 Highway, I would think, as well as motorists arrive and find they can't get in and out of that option. Paul Kruger coming into Capital Park, Pretoria, looking busy this morning. Durban, Walnut Road closed at ICC. If you normally come down through sort of Old Fort and onto Walnut Road, you won't be able to get straight through this morning. Event there closing that road down. And Cape Town, very busy out of Mitchell's Plain, just at Morgan Steer through to Spine Road closure of the M7, just forcing traffic onto sort of local alternatives, and it's all backed up. And the other big one, here's one to avoid, coming out of Tableview Parklands and Bloberg, stationary truck Marine Drive at Racecourse Road by the paddocks. That is already pushing Monday morning traffic back towards the Bayside Mall junction. If you're around Tableview and you normally come out that side, this morning it'll be Kuberg Road and Bloberg Road option past the refinery as an option that'll get you out and avoid Marine Drive. Rob Byrne, SAFM Traffic.
The business update on SAFM.
Intaling Lachela, good morning. How are you doing?
Morning, Stephen, and happy Monday. I hope you're well.
All good. How are the markets looking this morning?
Well, markets closed off last week on a high with the S&P 500 clocking its best daily performance since February. It was green across the board as softer U.S. employment numbers fueled hopes for a rate cut. Now, in Asia, markets also trading mostly in the green as investors in China and Japan return from a public holiday. The upbeat start is also on the back of those payroll numbers and hopes of another round of economic stimulus from China's central bank. Back at home, markets also ended the week in the green, with the all-share gaining 0.5%, boosted by the industrial 25, which was up over 1%. In currency markets, the dollar has been under pressure as Friday's employment numbers missed expectations. This has worked in the rand's favor. It's currently trading at 18.53 against the dollar, firmly below that 19 rand mark.
And then U.S. labor market, the growth eased in April. What does that tell us?
So growth in the U.S. labor market seems to be slowing. According to recent data, non-farm payrolls increased by 175,000 in April. This is way below economists' expectations of 243,000 and comes after March's rise of 315,000. Now, there was a slowdown in hiring in the country's construction, leisure, and public sectors. The unemployment rate, in the meantime, also rose to 3.9% from 3.8%. Now, economists have welcomed these numbers as a downbeat labor market supports the case for a rate cut in the US. Now, in last week's meeting, Fed Chair Jerome Powell hinted that it would need to take a slowing in the US job market to help convince policymakers that growth and inflation were likely to ease further. Powell has maintained a less hawkish stance than expected, saying that a hike was not likely.
And then the European Central Bank set to lead the rate cutting cycle, really.
Now, we've seen a lot of economists airing their concerns when it comes to monetary policy, Stephen. And after the Fed left rates unchanged last week, some economists have now warned of the effects of a divergence between the Fed and the European Central Bank and the impact that would have on the euro and other currency. And this comes as the ECB is expected, as you mentioned, to lead that rate cutting cycle, pegging in a rate cut as soon as next month. Now, inflation on that end continues to decline, and that region's economy buckles under pressure, that further supporting the narrative of a rate cut. Chief economist at Stresses Gashin, Daniel Lassalle, says that if the ECB starts to cut rates, it's basically giving the world a signal that the euro needs to weaken, and if the euro weakens, the region's import bill is going to rise, which then makes it even more difficult for the euro area to grow. So pretty much a catch-22, with growth on that end expanding a tepid 0.3% in the first quarter. So all eyes are on the ECB's next move, with its meeting scheduled for the 6th of June.
Intaling Lechela, thanks very much indeed. Back, of course, in an hour's time.
Africa Update on SAFM Sunrise, a continental overview of current African affairs.
The Rust advocate Sipho Mantula from the Thabo Mbeki African School of Public and International Affairs at UNISA. Good morning.
Steve, refreshing morning and Jumbo Africa to the listeners.
In Chad, they're having elections today. That's after their military leader seized power. Really important. There was a wave of coups in the Sahel. This is the first democratic election since then.
That is quite true, Stephen. But remember that yesterday it was the soldiers who have begun with the early voting. And today, as Chadians are deciding, they will open their polls at 7 a.m., close at 5 p.m. We're expecting 8.5 million registered to vote on these critical elections, with 9 candidates, Stephen, that you have 2 former prime ministers who are also involved in these elections. And also we are expecting the outcome on the 21st of May, the final results by June 5th. And if no candidate wins more than 50% of the votes, a runoff will be held on the 22nd of June.
And then in Togo, their ruling Union for the Republic parties won a sweeping majority.
Stephen, the others are saying, is it paving the way for President Faure Ghansibe to extend his 19-year rule under the new charter, because they are going to pass these constitutional amendments. They want these legislative elections. Out of 113 seats in parliament, they've got 108. They've got the majority already, Stephen. And that came out, over the weekend from the Electoral Commission announcing those results. We know there were boycotts by some opposition, claiming that those elections were irregular, but regional observers, they say they were satisfied with how those elections were conducted.
And then in Kenya, they've had the big flooding there. They were going to reopen schools next week. What's happened?
Stephen, there is a cyclone Hidai, not Hidai from Mozambique. Now it's Hidai coming from Kenya now. That is coming in the coming weeks, hitting Kenya now. That 150,000 people have been moved away from their houses. People who are living in 178 dams and reservoirs have been asked to evacuate. And that's where President Ruto over this weekend also saying that they will also postpone the opening of the schools due to the heavy rains and the floods. And like I said, Cyclone Hidai being forecasted for Kenya in these coming days.
And then Equatorial Guinea, our Minister of International Relations and Cooperation, Naledi Pandor, she held talks there, and obviously 2 of our citizens, 2 of our people are being held there.
Stephen, it's like you are reading my script. I don't know how, but there are 2 scripts from Dirko. Is that she was on a working visit to can engage on the issues of what you can call global issues, regional issues, signing a memorandum of understanding on what they will do, a joint commission between South Africa and Equatorial Guinea. That's what comes from Dirko. And as you're saying Klassen Munyela was asked about the two citizens who are languishing in jail for almost 14 months. Others are saying that the minister will also put pressure on the government of Equatorial Guinea to release those two South African oil engineers who were arrested in Equatorial Guinea on allegations of drug trafficking. Others are saying it is also related to what happened in South Africa, Stephen, when the the vice president's properties were also attached by South African government, including his two luxury houses in Cape Town.
And then in our archives, this day, 6th of May, 1980.
44 years ago, Stephen, an interesting archive that, you read an archive and you speak to this elder, Tozamile Bota, about what does this day mean to him when he breaks the banning order, skips to Lesotho, goes to Zambia, end up being in London. But this is an elder who was also leading what you can call the ZWI, the Civic Association, expelled from Fort Hare in 1976. And also, Stephen, in our archive of looking 30 years of our freedom, democracy, is one person who they crafted what we have as the local government system in South Africa post-1994. Asante sana SG, as was in the conversation, SAFM observing the Africa Month.
Russ Advocate Sipho Montula, thank you very much indeed. Really appreciate it. Back tomorrow more news from our continent through the day, 20 minutes to 7.
Call us on 086 000 2032.
Kay on the line from Kempton Park. Kay, hi. The situation with campuses in the United States all over Gaza. Go for it.
Yes, Stephen. I'm very much I won't say perplexed as such, but it's surprising for countries that are that they are saying that they are the moral compass of democracy, or they always talk about democracy, and yet the very same country that is the champion of that, or that is projecting itself as a champion of that institution or that body, is the one that is transgressing the very same principles that they are standing for. The very same thing that is happening in Israel, as you were speaking to that guy from Al Jazeera, is the very same. As much as US can say that they can, but they should be the ones that are standing forth and say we are defending the media freedom and whatnot and whatnot. When everyone talks about the killing of the shelling of Gaza, where journalists have been massacred, no one US doesn't seem to be taking any position. So actually, this thing is eroding anything that US stand for. In my perspective as a human being now, that as a citizen of the world, I really don't take anything that US says as any serious, because they are a mediocre country, if I were to put it in that way. As much as they have tried all these projections that they've been trying, for me, I think it has always been PR, and there's nothing else that they can say around morality from here going forward.
Well, let's see. I mean, I think that the situation in Gaza is a huge test for the United States, and we're seeing that. I mean, and we're also seeing public opinion changing. But Kay, I think your point is a valid point. I think it's part of the bigger conversation.
Yeah, I think it has grown on their face in whatever way that they were trying to, whatever that now the narrative that they control the world. What do you call this? I don't want to say propaganda, but I want to say that they always find in the midst of what ought to be communicated to the world what suits the narrative of the US.
Sure.
It has been proven over and over again.
All right, Kay in Kempton Park. Thank you, Maxwell and Tswane. Maxwell, hi. The ANC, the disciplinary inquiry or the disciplinary hearing into former President Zuma. Go for it.
Yeah, two quick points, Stevens. I think the ANC is not decisive. Is it their decision, Stevens, based on intelligence or what, to postpone that one? Because for me, it looks like it's a decision that was made by the social media situation. And on top of that, how do they allow Zuma to go and contest for MK Party while he does have dual membership of the ANC and MK Party? For me, I think it's a disgrace. They should have went ahead and disciplined Zuma, and we'll see what is happening. And the last point, Stephen, I would love you to get hold of AfriForum, because because I heard that they are doing something that even the police, they can't do. They want to patrol the N4 about the spikes that we're getting in this country each and every morning and evening. Exactly. So I think that doing the good job, there are a lot of narrative that they are an African organization, but for them to go all out and protect the majority of people in this country, I think it's a big up in my behalf.
All right, Maxwell and Swane, thank you. Interesting point. 16 minutes now to 7.
Way to sell your car by far.
Mama Kiti, I heard Rand Water talking on the radio about how dangerous it is for people to encroach on their pipeline servitude.
Yes, those high-pressure Rand Water pipelines are under the ground distributing megaliters of water. When people build on top of the pipeline, Rand Water is unable to conduct maintenance on the pipeline, which has a negative impact on water provision. Pipelines can burst without warning. People could get seriously injured or worse.
Yes, people can die from a bursting pipe. That is why people need to understand that Rand Water servitude is where a Rand Water pipeline is located. If we build our houses or businesses on a Rand Water servitude, then we are encroaching on that servitude. They say if communities want to know whether they have encroached over servitudes, they should look for the Rand Water beacons.
The beacons indicate the presence of Rand Water pipelines under the ground. They're rectangular, made of concrete, are painted either white or blue, and have the Rand Water logo on them.
Let's take a walk around our area to see if there are any Rand Water beacons so that we can also tell the neighbors.
Rand Water, celebrating 120 years of existence and still finding new ways to provide clean, portable bulk water.
Hear that? That's the sound of deliciousness in your kitchen after watching Ready Steady Cook. You don't season the same no more. The way you chop, slay. You do it with so much flair because you've channeled your Salt Bay. Uyashisa. Turn up the heat. Off the bone with the meat. You're in your kitchen prime. Always dish it on time. Need I serve more? Catch Ready Steady Cook weekdays at 7 p.m. on S3 and channel your inner 5-star chef. Channel a better you with S3.
Big stories of the day. Hashtag SAFM Sunrise.
13 minutes to 7. Good morning. It's now being confirmed that 4,889 workers at the SA Post Office have received notices that they're going to be retrenched. The business rescue practitioners at the post office are trying to reduce the number of people working there from the current figure of around 11,000. Government's refused to provide more emergency funding for the post office. As you know, it's been struggling for many, many years. Matthew Parks is the spokesperson of the Congress of South African Trade Unions, COSATU. Matthew, good morning. Does government really have any other option here? No one wants retrenchments. Each retrenchment is a tragedy. But does government have other options, really, in this situation?
Good morning. Thanks for having us. Look, it is a tragedy. It's a tragedy for these possibly 4,700 staff who might be affected in themselves as the unions and government, including the Ministers for Communication and Labour, as well as the UIF, on what needs to be done. It's a question of kind of fixing that vehicle to make sure it addresses all the kind of concerns. But we think there is a possibility to revive the post office. The post office once was a thriving entity. Obviously, it fell into a lot of problems because of incompetent management, most particularly failing to keep up with structural changes in that sector. People no longer post letters. They rather courier them, etc. So it hasn't kept pace with that. But we think there is a plan. There is some intervention. We can give it a fighting chance. The government had set aside 3.4 billion rand in the budget last year to help pay off his debts. The president has signed the Post Bank Amendment Act, which will enable the Post Bank, which is a symbiotic partner of the post office, to enter as a fully fledged license, a bank for consumers. Parliament passed about 2 weeks ago the Post Office Amendment Bill, which will enable the post office to enter the lucrative courier sector as well as to become a one-stop shop for government services too. We think all of these, plus the UF's, TERS funding, the Temporary Employment Relief Scheme funding, could give it a fighting chance over the next 12 months to implement a turnaround plan. And we have seen, Stephen, already the headcount has decreased significantly. Last year, when they first announced intention to retrench 6,000 staff, the headcount was about 6,000. Today, it's about 11,000. So we think they have gone far enough to reduce the headcount. What's needed now is to save those jobs and to implement a turnaround plan. But we are hoping the next few days we could find some sort of an agreement between ourselves to resolve it.
I mean, so the question is, what is the role of the post office in the 21st century? Now, we've seen in the US and the UK, for example, those operations are still running, and they've been running despite all the changes in their societies. In some cases, every now and then, they'll make a profit. We really need to follow all of that. I worry, though, that we've got too far behind, that the damage may have been done, and that the post office can never really catch up. I mean, I appreciate the vision that you spell out. I just worry that maybe it's just gone too far.
No, your worry is 100% correct. And honestly, this is a tragedy. It didn't take a rocket scientist to see that in the last 10 years, people have moved from sending letters. I mean, you and I, Stephen, I doubt we've sent letters in the last decade, maybe even longer than that. And the post office just tragically failed to keep pace with those changes. We think there is still space to catch up, but there's not a huge amount of space. And right now for these workers, we don't have more than weeks. We've got a few days. The retrenchment notice was sent out. They've been told not to come back to work. That's already from last week, Wednesday. But ultimately, we think the post office can play a role. It has a unique footprint in our townships, in rural towns and villages, etc., that no other company has. If you go to Limpopo, you'll find a post office closer to you than you'll find the nearest, commercial bank's ATM. So there is a space, but again, life doesn't sit still waiting for you to catch up. They've got to move with speed. We think ultimately they can do so, but it's got to be a combination. They have got to enter the courier industry, and the courier industry is doing very well, Stephen. It's making a killing and so forth. The post bank, amazingly, it's got a significant customer base. It's got about 1 million customers, so there is an appetite for it amongst rural areas and townships, the elderly and so forth. But they've got to be smarter also about how they partner with government, to become a one-stop shop where you can apply for your ID, your SASSA grant, your NSFAS funding, your SME funding. But if they don't do that, and if they don't have the support of government to use them for those services, and if government doesn't use the post office for its courier services, if they don't use it for the banking services, then it's going to struggle. But if government can give it a bit of support as a number one client, not necessarily bailouts, but just as a client, that can give it the kind of fighting space it needs to get on its feet.
Matthew Parks, thank you, spokesperson for COSATU. 8 minutes now to 7.
SAFM, guiding you through the rush hour traffic.
Update, if you come out of Germiston, Alberton, and you normally use Rand Airport Road to on-ramp onto the N3, that ramp is closed. There's some protesting in that area, so that'll just sort of disrupt traffic flow between Alberton and Germiston, as motorists will need to divert away from that closure, burning tyres on that ramp. The problem there, Smith Street is closed on the weekend. Smith Street at the Mike 1 highway following last week's fire, and that's already causing a bit of confusion for motorists coming up the Mike 1. Some quite heavy traffic into that closure. The Mike 1 is open, but it's the ramps in Smith Street itself linking Braamfontein one side through to central Joburg effectively on the other that is all shut down and having quite a big impact on traffic flow. Will be busy while that remote road remains closed. Paul Kruger coming into Capital Park into Durban stays busy, into Pretoria stays very busy. If you're driving in from Pretoria North, it's a route that's just getting busier by the week. Paul Kruger down towards the Capital Park area. Durban, no traffic lights, M7 at Bel Air and Wakesley, so some super heavy backlogs on the M7. A little bit worse than normal as you line up towards the Bluff area. Queues already back to Queensborough. Looks like an issue on the N2 before Queen Nandi Drive. There's some queuing pressure ahead of Umgeni Road. That's after the roadworks. And then Cape Town, the stationary truck container on Marine Drive at Racecourse Road at the paddocks. It's effectively blocking that junction. Marine Drive is terrible. Backlogs from the Sunningdale area. And we can already see motorists just avoiding it in big numbers, queuing up the Bloberg Road down towards the refinery side of Tableview. If you're coming out of Tableview Parklands, Bloberg and surrounds this morning, make sure you got plenty of time to get through what are going to be some properly congested routes. Rob Byrne, SAFM Traffic.
Agenda setting conversations of the day.
7 minutes to 7. Good morning. Well, we've been talking about retrenchments in the post office. Also, I'm afraid, looks like 4,000 jobs could go at the mining company Sibanye Stillwater. Big issues happening in mining at the moment, as you know. Mpho Pakedi is the Deputy General Secretary of the National Union of Mine Workers. Mpho, good morning. Thanks for your time.
Good morning, Stephen, and how are you?
I'm well, thanks. So we have these planned retrenchments. Are you worried about other retrenchments? In the middle of all of this is the Anglo-American BHP Billiton story.
Yes, indeed. This year, in actual fact, since late last year, we have been experiencing a lot of retrenchments, in particular in the platinum belt. To our shock, also, Sibanye Gold also gave us a notice this year, almost some few weeks ago.
Do you believe there could be a profitable future for these mines? I mean, do you think that these mines could still operate, or do you think the companies have no choice?
No, I believe that these companies, they can still be profitable. And for instance, when Sibanye also did the same retrenchment late last year in one of their four shaft, there are one business company that came forward to say, look, we can run this company and we can run it profitably. But unfortunately, Sibanye refused to give them an opportunity. So from time to time, there are companies that are coming forward to say, look, we think that these mines or this shaft are still profitable, we can still run them.
Are you going to take any action to try and stop these retrenchments? I mean, I know, there's talk of a strike. A strike against retrenchments is complex. Are you looking at anything like that?
We are weighing our options. Indeed, we are trying our best to try and stop this retrenchment, but you know that the law is not on our side. For instance, the 189 is giving companies the right, once they have concluded 60 days of consultation, they can continue with retrenchment with or without our consent. So what we have lined up is that we are going to show our consent. We are going to plead, to kind of like seek support from the community at large by having a protest march on the 11th of May, this coming Saturday.
There's so many elements to all of this, and you know how difficult this is going to be, Paul. But it would seem in a way that the forces of history are moving against you for the moment. I mean, prices can change, and we've seen how the platinum price, spiked and then dropped so dramatically, which is one of the reasons this is happening, things happening in the gold price as well. Do you believe the cycle will turn, or do you think the people who lose their jobs now are at risk of never working in the mining industry again?
Well, it is very difficult to predict, Stephen. But of course, from time to time, you will have fluctuation of mineral prices. For instance, at some point, gold was not that good. As we speak now, at least the gold price is better. Hence, we find it difficult to understand as to why Sibanye will embark in such a huge number of retrenchment. We know that there are other factors that they have alluded to, but we think that they can still do something. They can still avoid retrenchment, or they can even reduce them to very small numbers as opposed to big numbers that they are giving us. So from time to time, we think things will turn around. We cannot entirely predict the future.
Paul Pakedi, thank you, Deputy General Secretary of the National Union of Mine Workers. Very difficult in the mining sector at the moment. 3 minutes to 7.
At SFM Radio and at Stephen Grootes on Twitter.
Thomas on the line from Newcastle. Thomas, hi. Former President Zuma and the ANC. Go for it.
Hey, Steve, I'll tell you what, I've just been wondering throughout this debacle as to now I know where the strength of the ANC has been all along. The old man is beating them at the court, he's beating them at mass action, he's beating them flat in any direction, And I'm just thinking with the ANC, they shouldn't have adopted the idea of let's take the bandage off slowly. Because one way or the other, you feel the pain. They should have just read the thing before the elections already, and they would have settled by now. And would be having a good run, and we will be talking about that. Right now, the former president is really wrecking havoc. I feel for them.
Yeah, so they should have done it in December. He held that press conference. They should have acted immediately.
Exactly. And even earlier, because if you remember, they've been avoiding, the whole idea of getting him out of jail when it was ruled that he must go back.
Yeah.
They did all that just to cover the fact that, there are settlement in the country and whatnot. And they just kick the tin and the can further on. Now they have to pick it. One way or the other, you must pick the can up.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, we all are involved now.
Yeah. hear what you mean, Thomas, on the line from Newcastle. It's an interesting point. We're kind of all involved now. Yep. Other voice notes coming through on this morning on 0614104107.
Good morning, Steve. Sean here from a Winter Gauteng. I think we can only see now the influence of Jacob Zuma on the country and how he can hold a country to ransom once again. I mean, he's running for one party, he's in a disciplinary hearing for another party, and I've never, ever seen something like that in any other country. And that's all because the ANC are scared of him. You can't help but wonder what political play is happening in the background. Anyway, have a fantastic morning.
Sean, thank you. Yeah, very interesting to see. Well, more on that in the next little while, including Zuma's attempt to get some of the judges in the Constitutional Court to recuse themselves. We'll look at the situation regarding Shell as well. You with SAFM leading the conversation. Good morning. It's Monday morning. It's 7 o'clock. Outsurance will go out of their way to try and save you money on your car insurance. If they can't, ask for 500 Rand. SMS out to 30754. Now that's good news.
In our top stories, concerns in the Eastern Cape following detection of foot and mouth disease, and Zuma's disciplinary hearing postponed over security concerns. Good morning. The Kucha municipality in the Eastern Cape says it's concerned that the outbreak of foot and mouth disease in Humansdorp could negatively affect the province's economy. The municipality has launched a campaign aimed at creating the awareness and prevention of the spread of the disease. Anthony Davis is a local veterinarian.
The farm manager sent us photographs, and we couldn't believe it because we have never seen foot and mouth disease in this area before. It seems impossible. We know the outbreaks are really far away from us, so initially our thoughts were this can't be happening. But we immediately took samples and sent them off to the OBI. Because the lesions looked so characteristic, the farm was quarantined immediately. And the next day, within 18 hours, we had confirmation that it was in fact foot and mouth. What we also did is we put out a warning to the farmers the same day that we suspected it to ensure that the gates were locked and that they apply good biosecurity.
The ANC has cited security concerns as the reason for the postponement of its former president, Jacob Zuma's disciplinary hearing to a date yet to be announced. Zuma was due to appear before the ANC's National Disciplinary Committee tomorrow for allegedly violating the party's constitution. Zuma was suspended earlier this year following his endorsement of the new Umkhonto weSizwe party. The ANC Secretary General Fikile Mbalula addressed the media in Johannesburg yesterday.
No, we said the NDC must stand in abeyance, including virtual, till after elections. We don't expect anything to take place on Tuesday, as the instruction has been communicated.
Meanwhile, the MK party is adamant its members will still descend on the ANC headquarters at Luthuli House in Johannesburg tomorrow, despite the postponement of Zuma's disciplinary hearing. The MK party spokesperson Nhlamulo Ndlela.
We will be there as far as we're concerned. We're there by invite. The ANC invited us over, and they knew very well that wherever President Zuma is, we'll be there to support him. So, for them to also refer to a provocation of some sort, the mere fact that they can request President Zuma's presence at Luthuli House, for their kangaroo court DC, before the elections is absurd. So, they brought this upon themselves, and President being, one person who's not a coward would definitely be there. So, and in person. So, and that's where we're at. That's where we stand.
In election-related news, the president of the South African Council of Churches, the Archbishop Thabo Makgoba, says the administration that will take office after the May 29th elections must address the needs of South Africans, especially the poor. He was delivering a sermon during the National Day of Prayer for Elections at the Grace Bible Church in Pimville in Soweto yesterday. Makgoba says the new leadership should consist of patriotic people.
We remind ourselves that having voted, we still need to hold that mirror before ourselves and before the politicians and before everybody that makes South Africa work and be most loving to say, how do we roll up our sleeves and meet the needs, particularly of the poorest of the poor? How do we make people safe? It is our prayer that as the new cabinet and the parliament is inaugurated, it will be characterized by people who love themselves, who love this country, and who love God.
Further afield, and finally, the President of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, says she will address the need for fair competition with China when she meets with President Xi Jinping and the French President in Paris today, the BBC's Andrew Harding reports.
The Chinese are essentially dumping heavily subsidized cars and other electric vehicles on the European market. On the other hand, though, the French will be looking for their own industries to get better access to the Chinese market. So that's cosmetics, for instance, that the Chinese will be offering sweeteners, if you like, to the French. They'll also be offering sweeteners to the Germans, who have their own big car manufacturers, their electric manufacturers inside China. So it's very easy for the Chinese to try and play off different parts of Europe against each other.
Recapping the top story, the Kucha municipality in the Eastern Cape says it's concerned that the outbreak of foot-and-mouth disease in Himmansdorp could negatively affect the province's economy. For SFM News, I am Anne Musa.
And thank you. Those were the top stories for the summer. Don't miss out on a possible car insurance saving. SMS out to 30754 for a quote. Outsurance, where you always get something out. Stop horsing around and see if you could find a great deal on your car insurance. 32-year-old Lorraine called Outsurance to get a quote for her white 2023 Toyota Corolla Cross GRS and pays just 770 Rand a month. To see how much you could save, SMS out to 30754 for an Outsurance quote. That's out to 30754 now. Licensed insurer and FSP. T's and C's online.
A very good morning to you. In your SFM Sports headlines, soccer, Mamelodi Sundowns and Orlando Pirates to clash in the Nedbank Cup final. And we're celebrating South Africa's best at the SA Sports Awards, where our sports stars took home top honours. Stay tuned for all the winning details just before 7:30.
SAFM, guiding you through the rush hour traffic.
Still very slow coming out of Ekurhuleni this morning. Only a crash and a breakdown at Galuli. So the N12 and R24 routes are queuing. The N12 is back as far as Craft Road, and the R24 back beyond the Edenvale exit back towards Barber Road. Mike 1's pretty heavy up to Smith Street. Smith Street being closed through the Mike 1 highway. So all sorts of confusion and congestion around there. Durban, the N2 has a crash at Queen Nandi Drive. So you've got a queue coming from the M7 up through Spaghetti Junction into the roadworks, and then pretty much a joined up queue from the roadworks through towards this crash at Queen Nandi Drive. If you're heading up for flight connections, make sure you've got plenty of time. Cape Town Marine Drive, a stationary container, shipping container across the roadway at the paddocks in Milnerton. That is causing major backlogs out of Tableview, both along Marine Drive to the obstruction and the Bloberg Road option, which is backing up now beyond Wood Drive, and that's a heavy queue out the other way towards Cooper Road and the refinery. Rob Byrne, SAFM Traffic.
SAFM Sunrise. A vivid start to your day.
7 after 7, good morning with SFM Sunrise. I'm Stephen Grootes. Lots coming up. More, of course, on the situation regarding Shell. Are they leaving? Why are they leaving? I think why are they leaving is really the story here. So often the story is in the why, isn't it? We'll talk more about former President Jacob Zuma, that disciplinary inquiry that's now a disciplinary complaint, or the hearing that's now not going ahead now, but will go ahead only after the election. MK says, you've heard in the bulletins, they'll still be protesting outside Latuli House tomorrow. Very strange situation, if you ask me. Very interested in your view on it. And then also, a little later, religion and politics. Big services yesterday calling for peace in our country. I think very important for people of faith that happens. How does that work? What role should religious leaders be playing in our politics? All of that to come. You with SFM 8 after 7.
Hear that? That's the sound of deliciousness in your kitchen after watching Ready Steady Cook. You don't season the same no more. The way you chop, slay. You do it with so much flair, because you've channeled your Salt Bay. Uyashisa. Turn up the heat. Off the bone with the meat. You're in your kitchen prime. Always dishing on time. Need I serve more? Catch Ready Steady Cook weekdays at 7 p.m. on S3 and channel your inner 5-star chef. Channel a better you with S3.
The University Registrar and Secretary to Convocation, Dr. Joel Baloy, cordially invites all members of the University of Venda Convocation to attend the AGM on Saturday, 11 May 2024 in Polokwane, Merupa Hotel at 10:30. The AGM will consider the Vice-Chancellor's State of Campus report, RSVP and confirm attendance, please visit www.univen.ac.za/announcements or contact Mr. Mashuda Ramarebo on 060-906-1902.
EFC is live this Thursday. Two grappling wizards will battle it out for the vacant welterweight title at EFC 113 as Gelson Souza and Zakir Banat fight it out for championship glory. Plus, Faiz Jacobs is out for revenge against the great Sylvester Chipumbu for number one contendership. EFC 113 live this Thursday. Watch it on SABC Sport Channel on DTT Channel 4 from 7 p.m. Brought to you by SABC Sport.
SAFM 104 to 107. Nationwide.
10 after 7, good morning. Confirmation yesterday, the oil company Shell, they operate around 700 filling stations in South Africa, is planning to leave the country. They've been here for 122 years. It's also locked in a dispute with its BEE partner, Tebe Investments. It does not want to allow Tebe Investments to exercise a particular option in a Shell subsidiary, or that's how it looks at the moment. Jimmy Moyaha, he's host of our business show here on SFM, he joins us now. Jimmy, good morning. Thanks for your time this Monday morning.
Morning, Stephen. Morning to the listeners.
We see their petrol stations everywhere. Why does Shell want to leave?
It's quite an interesting conversation because there's so many parts to it. So at the moment, Shell is reassessing its or reviewing its operations in its entirety. And I suppose the South African operation came into question as well. If you remember back last week on Thursday, Shell put out their first quarter numbers for the new financial year, and revenues came in much better than expected. I think estimates were around $6.5 billion, came in at $7.7 billion, and they announced a $3.5 billion share buyback program to add value to shareholders and just sort of enhance and improve the business. I suppose as part of that, they just reviewed their ongoing conversation. But this is not a new conversation with Tebe that the Shell has been engaged in. This has been ongoing since 2022, where initially Tebe wanted to activate their opt-out clause or their cash-out clause that was put into their contract that effectively would let them disinvest or take their share of the investment out and sort of just sell their 28% holding at a time of their choosing. So Tebe elected to activate that particular clause, and again, this has been ongoing since 2022. So nothing's new here per se. I suppose there's some ongoing tension between both parties, from both sides, depending on which side of the conversation you're sitting on. You've expressed some concerns, they haven't been addressed, and it's just been an uncomfortable conversation, I imagine, for the last 2 years.
So the only reason they're going is because of this dispute with Tebe Investments. I mean, it's a big thing to leave South Africa because of that, so it must really matter to them.
Yeah, so if Tebe were to step away, then Shell may, under the current BEE legislation, need to find a new BEE partner and all of that. And I suppose they could have also assessed it from their perspective to say that it's no longer economically viable for us to be in South Africa at this stage. That could be for a number of reasons. If you remember, Shell also had a refinery that they were a co-owner of in South Africa. At some stage, South Africa had 4 to 6 refineries that were operational, that were owned by various petroleum companies. Shell's one in particular, I think they shared ownership with BP. Total Energies had their refinery, Engen had their refinery, and all of these petroleum companies have since closed their refineries and were now importing even more fuel. At some stage, I think we were importing about 50 to 60% of fuel into South Africa. I think at the moment we're a net importer closer to 80%, and that obviously does have its benefits, but it also does have its challenges. It means that for us, petrol prices are going to be more expensive and those sorts of things. It also means that for the likes of Shell, yes, you might make some money importing the fuel into South Africa, but you lose out on what you may have made if you had imported at a lower cost, refined locally, and then subsequently sold into the market. So I think there's been a lot of ongoing tension for Shell in that respect. There's also been concerns from various petroleum companies around policy uncertainty within the South African landscape, and it could be that the timing of this, I mean, if you look at the other developments we've seen in South Africa, we've seen the likes of Volkswagen saying that they're concerned about the South African development around EVs, and that's why they're not bringing their EVs here. You look at the BHP acquisition specifically, excluding Anglo's South African assets. So it's a very interesting narrative that could be looked at to say that Shell might not believe that South Africa is worth an investment at this stage, despite the fact that just 2 years ago when they were having this conversation, they said they were committed to just energy transition and committed to being around for a lot longer. So I suppose it is that serious that the breakdown in the communication or the breakdown in the relationship has left Shell thinking, well, we'd rather exit.
And quickly, if you can, Jimmy, I mean, if they left, would someone, so the fuel stations are probably independently owned, but that operation must be worth something. Would someone take that over?
That's very interesting because there's so many permutations around that, right? So depending on what price point, Tebe values their 28% stake at around 3.7 billion rand, or around $200 million, which would value the Shell stake, assuming that's the other 72%, at north of $400 million there. So that would be twice as big as the Tebe stake. Now, if Shell is to exit, how much are they going to exit at? How much are they going to sell the shares at? Because they've already said that they're valuing Tebe's 28% at basically zero, which means that they've written down the investment on their book down to below whatever it was initially. And that means that any potential shareholder that comes in at this point could, one, find the shareholding at a bargain if Shell wants to sell it at R1 a share, for example, like the South 32 assets were sold a couple of years ago. But at the same time, it then has a detrimental impact on the other shareholder, which in this case is Tebe. So the valuations of this are going to be quite important to see. It's less about which partner comes in, but at what price points they decide to come in at, because no partner wants to come in at a really, really high price point, understanding that they cannot use the Shell name and they have to rebrand and all of those things, and then agree to a valuation that might not suit them. It might not make financial sense for them. But at the same time, there are assets on the ground. You're very right, Stephen. There are assets in the country. There's 600 plus filling stations here that do operate, and they can be converted to independent operations, I suppose. But it depends entirely on how this conversation unfolds and we get to the crux of it around the valuations and the dispute between those valuations.
Jimmy Moyahab, thank you. Host of our business show. You'll hear him again later this evening, 16 minutes after 7.
Can you guess who is responsible for the state of our country? You. Yes, you. By deciding to shun the electoral process, you have given a blank check to those who are in power to retain the same power and continue with their corruption and poor governance, leading to unemployment and increased poverty. If you have indeed been voting, then clearly you have been voting for the wrong people. Vote Azapo, the only party that truly cares for black people.
This political election broadcast was brought to you in terms of the CASA regulation governing the election period. The views expressed in this political election broadcast are those of the political party and not of the SABC. First in the morning, SAFM Sunrise with Stephen Grootes.
17 after 7. Well, another series of developments around former President Jacob Zuma. He's now the leader, of course, of the political party Umkhonto weSizwe. Later this week, the Constitutional Court is due to hear arguments about whether Zuma can be a candidate to be a member of Parliament for MK after the Electoral Court ruled that he could be. Zuma is now set in legal papers. He'll ask 6 of the Constitutional Court judges to recuse themselves because they've ruled in other cases around Zuma. Several of the judges ruled in the case that saw him being sentenced to 15 months in jail 2021. Other judges have ruled in other matters involving him. Professor Pierre de Vos is an expert on constitutional law and also Claude Leon Foundation Chair in Constitutional Governance at UCT. Professor de Vos, good morning.
Good morning, Stephen.
As I understand it, Zuma is arguing these judges may have bias against him. They've ruled against him in the past. Does he have a strong argument?
Well, no. to be clear, as Mr. Zuma's lawyers in their court papers say they readily accept that merely having sat in a previous matter involving Mr. Zuma does not provide sufficient grounds for a recusal. The test for recusal is actually very strict. Recently, the Constitutional Court rejected, for example, the application for Chief Justice Mogoeng to be recused in a case dealing with hate speech about Israel, despite the fact that he had made various comments about that. So, in this case, Mr. Zuma and his lawyers do not really say what else happened here other than they had previously ruled against him. So it's not clear on what basis really they are asking for the recusal.
If they did recuse themselves, there wouldn't be a quorum, and obviously that would then probably mean that the last ruling might have to stand, or they'll have to be acting judges. But could judges also say, even if there is an apprehension of bias, it's in the interest of justice for the court to hear the case? I mean, there are lots of different options here.
Yes, so there is the doctrine of necessity that says in certain cases judges will have to hear the case because it's necessary for them to do so. Mr. Zuma's lawyers actually make the correct point that in this case that is not necessary because one could also appeal to the Supreme Court of Appeal. So there is in fact another court that one could appeal to. I assume the ISC didn't appeal to them because they assumed, given the history of Mr. Zuma and litigation, that he would then, if he lost, also appeal to the Constitutional Court.
There are other issues here, and I think the hearing's on Friday. Are we now going to see the judges making a decision on the recusal at the same time as they make a decision around the case itself? So they would hear both together, because the timeline is going to matter.
Yes, so I was wondering about this. The Mr. Zuma's lawyers asked that obviously the recusal application should be considered first, whether there will then be a postponement or whether they will consider the matter, and in other cases where a leave for appeal is asked for and then the whole substance or the merits of the case are also argued. I really don't know. I think Chief Justice or the Deputy Chief Justice in this case will have to give guidance on what will happen.
And the case itself, so the Electoral Court said Zuma could be a candidate because he had been sentenced by the Constitutional Court and thus could not appeal that sentence. So it's an argument in a way about the definition of a sentence. Do you think the Electoral Court ruling is going to be upheld by the Constitutional Court in the end?
Well, I think on the one, there are two grounds that various judges in the Electoral Court used. The ground that says that because there was no appeal possible, there was in fact no sentence. That ground is in conflict with the Constitutional Court judgment, and that is also indirectly accepted by Mr. Zuma's lawyers in their papers. The other ground is that because of the remission of Mr. Zuma's sentence, he wasn't in fact sentenced to more than 12 months imprisonment, which would have disqualified him. If one follows the plain meaning of Section 47, that ground is also far-fetched, but it is a little bit more tricky. If Mr. Zuma is going to win, I would think he would win on this ground in the sense that if the court accepts that when a sentence imposed by a court is reduced, there's a remission of sentence, then that section actually means that it is assumed that the person wasn't actually sentenced to more than 12 months imprisonment. In other words, if they accept, if they give more of a purposive or broader interpretation to the words. But as it stands there, what the words say is that if you are sentenced to more than 12 months imprisonment, you are not qualified to become an MP.
I worry about the timelines here in that if you look at all of the things, as you say, some of it's quite tricky. If you look at all of the arguments that are coming up in this case, the hearing is on Friday, the elections are now 3.5 weeks away. I don't know if we'll get a judgment before the elections. And wouldn't it be fair to say to voters that they must know who they're voting for, one way or another?
Yes, the Constitutional Court has said in other judgments that voters need to know who's on party lists because it's rather important who is on the party list for you to decide who to vote for. Of course, it might all be academic because, as Mr. Zuma's lawyers suggest in their papers, he might not want to go back to the National Assembly because he says, I don't know what the reasons are, that there are possibility that he will then lose his current benefits that he enjoys as the former president. So it might all be academic, But if this is not resolved by the time the election happens, the fear is, I think, that this could then be used to discredit or try and delegitimize the election and the final results. So hopefully, if whatever happens, hopefully the court can resolve it by the 29th of May.
Professor Pierre de Vos, thank you. Really do appreciate the time. Claude Leon Foundation Chair in Constitutional Governance at the University of Cape Town, senior expert on our Constitution. 24 minutes after 7.
And we'll be now playing Kena on Mondays at 4:30. The day has changed, but the time slot hasn't. So if you're interested in news that's happening with us kids and our peers around the world, don't forget to tune in. See you there.
Good afternoon, passengers. This is your captain speaking. I'd like to begin by welcoming everyone on board to Flight S3 2024 as we channel our sense of adventure and inbound for a trip around the breathtaking wonders of Africa. So get ready to open up and see our continent like never before. Africa's beauty is a sight to behold, from the peaks of Tanzania to the rainforests in Rwanda, from the pyramids in Egypt to the lakes in Malawi. There's magic in every destination that opens our eyes and changing our lives forever. Our trusted cabin crew, Doctors Fez and Anyesu, will keep you entertained throughout the journey. On behalf of our crew members, we'd like to say thank you for flying with us and channeling a better you. Don't forget to catch the new season of Top Travel every Saturday at 8:30 p.m. on S3. Sit back, relax, and enjoy the ride. S3, open up.
This is SAFM Sport with Zai Khan.
Zai, good morning. Well, the Springboks, the SA Rugby, obviously taking most of the sports awards last night.
I know, and they did it in incredible fashion. It was like a spring cleaning weekend for them, collecting all the trophies that they could. This was the 17th South African Sports Awards held in Sun City in the Northwest last night. And yes, Bok captain Siya Kolisi walking away with the People's Choice Award that was voted for by South African sports fans. Kolisi was also named the Sports Star of the Year. Jacques Ninaba, the Coach of the Year. Mani Libok was named the Newcomer of the Year. And Eben Etzebeth walking away with the Sportsman of the Year. The Springboks were the Team of the Year, while SA Rugby President Mark Alexander was named Administrator of the Year. Simone Kruger and Mpumelelo Mhlongo were named Women's and Men's South African Sports Association for the physically disabled, respectively. Now, another winner on the night was sailor Kirsten Newshafer. She was named the Sports Women of the Year, and I mean, she sailed into history. She's conquered the seas as well as the Golden Globe race, becoming the first woman to win this grueling solo round-the-world challenge and honored as the Female World Sailor of the Year. Let's hear now from the Sportswoman of the Year, Kirsten Newshafer.
Well, I say never let yourself get put into a box. And for me, I was there as a competitor in my sport. In that moment, gender was not an issue, and that's how it should be. And some of the female sailors that came before me, but also the male sailors, the great explorers. And certainly a moment that I can remember, I was 12, it was 95 when the Springboks won the World Cup, and it was such a unifying thing. So it's something I'll never forget.
Moving to soccer news, Mamelodi Sundowns claiming a hard-fought 2-1 victory over Stellenbosch FC in a Nedbank Cup semi-final match played at the Dani Craven Stadium yesterday. Masanda Wana will join Orlando Pirates in the final, and that's scheduled to be played at the Mbombela Stadium on the 1st of June. Cricket action, Ravindra Jadeja claimed the key role with both batter and ball to help the Chennai Super Kings to a much-needed 28-run victory in their IPL match against the Punjab Kings, and it took place in Dharamsala. Jadeja top scored with 43 from just 26 balls in a disappointing 167 for 9 after Chennai were asked to bat first, but it proved more than enough with the Punjab crashing to 139 for 9 with Jadeja's left arm spin claiming 3 for 20 in his 4 overs. Golf now, and Louis Albertser cruised to a 7-stroke victory at the inaugural Waterfall City Tournament of Champions and claimed the R1 million check for first place at Royal Johannesburg yesterday. Albertser playing incredibly composed golf over the weekend, culminating in his final round of 64 to win on 23 under par for 265. Sunshine Ladies Tour professional Cassandra Alexander and the Welsh professional Reese Enoch shared second on 16 under par with respective final rounds of 68. Golf RSA star and reigning Africa amateur champion Alton van der Merwe finished as the leading amateur on 8 under par. And cycling, Team SD Works Pro Times Demi Vollering claimed victory in the final stage of La Vuelta Femenina to win the competition. It was also the second stage victory for Vollering. The Dutch rider finished 1 minute and 49 seconds ahead of fellow countrywoman Rejan Marcus and 2 minutes ahead of Italy's Elisa Longo Borghini. And finally, in the men's, Tadej Pogacar moved into the overall lead of the Giro d'Italia after winning stage 2 yesterday. The Slovenian suffered a puncture and crashed with 10 kilometers to go as the peloton chased down Andrea Piccolo and the last remaining member of the day's breakaway. That's a wrap of your sport. We'll bring you more on Sunrise, top of the hour. I'm Zai Khan.
Zai, thanks very much indeed. In a few minutes, the CEO of City Power in Joburg, why is asking for the army, the military, the SANDF to come in and help protect their infrastructure. You're with SFM leading the conversation. Good morning at 7:30.
Good morning. In the headlines, the Gampepe Commission of Inquiry into the Usundiso building fire in Johannesburg says action must be taken against the city's property company CEO Helen Bottas. The commission found the city of Johannesburg and its entities were liable for the deaths of 77 tenants of the building in the fire that took place in August last year. Police are investigating an incident related to the murder of an elderly couple at a farm in Glen outside Bloemfontein, and the Kucha municipality in the Eastern Cape says it's concerned that the outbreak of foot and mouth disease in Humansdorp could negatively affect the province economy. I'll have details on these and other stories at 8.
SAFM, guiding you through the rush hour traffic.
Just a reminder, south of Joburg Grand Airport Road remaining closed this morning. It was a closure earlier of the ramp onto the N3 highway, but it looks like a more full closure has gone in now of the roadway that effectively links to Lisa Park through to Germiston. So that section of Rand Airport Road, of South Rand, which becomes Rand Airport. So technically, we're probably looking at South Rand Road being closed away from the Heidelberg Road junction out towards Rand Airport is currently closed. There's no access from South Rand or Rand Airport onto the N3 as well, burning tyres in that area, causing some disruption. N12 into Galuli's, arriving in from Ekurhuleni, remains heavy. Earlier crash before Galuli, still there on the side of the road. Traffic parking back towards Jet Park Road. N1 fairly heavy today between Brakfontein and the new road exit, and the roadworks on the R21 are still there as we get into a new week, so delays coming into the Clayville area if you're airport bound. Driving to the airport at Durban, just a heads up, you need a bit of extra time to get through. There are 2 queues this morning from the M7 highway, heavy traffic up through Spaghetti Junction into the roadworks, and then the end of that queue you pick up another queue which is driving up into a crash just before Queen Nandi Drive. Cape Town today very heavy in the heart of Khayelitsha, after K Masimola and Spine Road Junction. Traffic on all approaches into that is literally stationary. Be a good one to avoid. And an earlier problem with a shipping container on Marine Drive at Racecourse Road has left some very busy conditions all over Tableview. Marine Drive is heavy, Bloberg Road to Kuberg Road's heavy, and Malabongwe out from Rivergate, big backlogs towards the N7. Rob Byrne, SAFM Traffic.
The business update on SAFM.
Intaling Lachela, morning again. How are the markets looking?
So let's kick things off in Asia. Markets on that front tracking Wall Street gains today as a softer than expected US jobs report fueled hopes that the Fed could start cutting rates soon. The Asia Dow is up 0.23% and China's Shanghai index rising over 1%. Now in the US, futures are mixed but remained largely subdued as investors awaited the release of consumer inflation data, which will be out on Wednesday. Analysts expect an easing in prices but say the CPI will remain above the Fed's 2% annual target range. On the local front, the JSE ended the week slightly higher with the all share up 0.5%. The rand in the meantime is making gains as the dollar is losing traction. The local unit trading at 18.53 against the greenback.
And Glencore now weighing a bit for Anglo-American.
It seems like Anglo-American's assets are in demand, Stephen. Now, according to Reuters sources, Glencore is weighing up a bid for Anglo-American. This, of course, comes after BHP approached Anglo with a $39 billion takeover bid, which Anglo declined. Now, if the rumors are true, this could spark a bidding war for the 107-year-old mining company. What we do know for sure is that Glencore has not approached Anglo, but internal discussions are taking place. Sources also said that at this stage, the talks may not result in an approach. In the meantime, BHP is said to be working on an improved offer as it still finds Anglo's copper assets attractive. The miner has until the 22nd of May to make another formal bid.
And then a report suggesting, as we've been discussing, Shell could actually leave South Africa. A huge story in many ways.
According to articles from the Sunday Times and City Press, Shell is planning to pull out of South Africa. And if this is true, many jobs could be on the line, Stephen. Now, the speculations follow a dispute between its BEE partner, Tebe Investment Corporation, that owns a 28% stake in Shell downstream South Africa. Now, the international oil giant owns the majority stake, which sits at 72%. Issues started in 2022 when Tebe expressed that it would like to implement its opt-out clause and cash out to reinvest the funds in growing the company. Now, this led to Tebe putting through a stake valuation based on the figures that Shell had initially provided. It valued its 28% stake in SDSA at $3.7 billion. Shell only responded to the submission after 8 months, backtracking on its figures and further saying that Tebe's stake was worthless. Now, when approached, Shell did decline to comment, saying that engagements with shareholders are confidential.
Tao Lengla-Chella, thanks very much indeed. Do appreciate it. More, of course, from the business world as we go through the day together. More this evening as well with Jimmy Moyaha on that situation around Shell. 24 minutes now to 8.
Big stories of the day. Hashtag SAFM Sunrise.
All right, good to hear from you this morning. You know the number 086002032. Lots going on. There is, of course, more on former President Zuma and the disciplinary. That's not happening for the moment. At least more on retrenchments in the post office as well. And then, as you've been hearing, the situation around Shell, the petrol group, the fuel group, the oil company, really. It seems planning on leaving South Africa. At the moment, as I understand it, still problems with electricity in the Joburg CBD after the incredible events last week underneath the M1 in the Joburg CBD, where cable thieves tried to steal cable. They started a fire that then went underground for some time, took a long time to put that out. Then there was a shootout between these cable thieves and City Power security workers. They were trying to stop them from stealing cable. They found a big ball, 600 kilograms of copper that had been stolen by these thieves. And now confirmation over the weekend that City Power has actually written to the National Police Commissioner, Fanny Masemola, and asking if they can please get help from the SANDF. Well, let's speak now to the CEO at City Power, Chifalaro Moshava. Chifalaro, good morning. Thanks for your time.
Good morning to you and your listeners.
Firstly, the situation regarding the electricity in the Joburg CBD. It's not all back on yet, is it?
No, unfortunately not at this point.
Okay. You are asking the army to come in. What are you asking the National Police Commissioner for?
So basically, we understand that there's an economic infrastructure task team, which is there to really support the likes of us in terms of cabin cable theft. So our appeal is for us to get priority, for us to be able to get the help, because we've been trying to do this on our own with our own security guards. We have gone to SAPS before, but we did not necessarily get the response we wanted. And understandably so, because obviously they're dealing with a whole lot of other issues. So us writing was for us to really just raise our hand and flag and say, please pay attention to us.
We've been hearing, time after time how difficult it's been. I mean, every sort of Monday morning we'd start a show with this installation at City Power attack, this has happened, etc. I mean, it must have cost you an absolute fortune. Are you in a position where you really, as civilians, can't protect your infrastructure? That's why you need military help?
Look, that's why the country has a security cluster, because I don't think it's all up to civilians. I think civilians can only do up to a point. We've got our own security teams within City Power that we pay for. And unfortunately, that means that the prices of electricity will then escalate, because instead of you just factoring in your normal running costs, you must now also factor in security costs. And that's not how it's supposed to be. Over and above that, I really thank the residents, because they do come to the party. We've got community policing forums that are in partnership with us, and they also do what they can. But over and above that, help is still required. As you said also in this instance, our own guards exchange, fire with the criminals. But that's not enough. So we still need more help in order to deal with the problems we're faced with.
It's not one organized group doing this, is it? It's a large number of these syndicates that seem to be operating in Joburg.
Differently large numbers. So we've got about 8 service delivery centers. For us as City Power, the biggest problem are in the Roodepoort area, the Randburg area, and of course inner city itself. So it is spread throughout city of Johannesburg areas of supply, but those 3 are the biggest hit.
So when you call the police, I mean, I understand police didn't actually come to the scene last week, or they didn't do very much. Are the police just, the SAPS specifically, are they not helping you at all?
Well, I'm thankful that now they are. So we've returned the letter, and we've since had very positive responses since our letter. In fact, even this morning, there are ongoing meetings that are happening so that they then get to see how best to support us. So we got a positive response from the letter that we wrote. But on the day of the sin, unfortunately, we didn't get the help that we wanted.
The only sort of positive that I can see is we're now on day, I think, 41 without load shedding. My understanding is that it's usually easier for people to steal cable during load shedding, but they can still do it when there's no load shedding. They basically force a power cut. Have you seen any decline in this since sort of load shedding stopped?
Not necessarily, because you see, the unfortunate part is this was actually done by also former contractors of City Power, right? People who know how to work on the network, even if it's live. So yes, it used to be very terrible during load shedding, but unfortunately people have mastered the art of being able to do this even when there's no load shedding.
Such a difficult situation. You haven't had a response yet from the military, hey?
We've had the response from the team that we wrote to, and they're meeting with us today. It's not necessarily the army. I think it's just SAPS, but I think from the security cluster perspective, they'll then assist us. So I'm quite hopeful that we'll get the help that we need. But the problem is really, really big, and it's costing us as City Power a lot. It's costing City of Johannesburg. It's costing the province. It's costing the country.
Thank you very much indeed. Chifularo Moshava, the CEO at City Power. Such a difficult situation. Really appreciate the time. 18 minutes to 8.
Call us on 086 000 2032.
All right, good to hear from you this morning. There's a lot going on, of course. City Power, just one of the big stories. July in Limpopo High. July, just switch me off, please. Just switch the radio off so that we can hear you, and so that we can hear you properly. In the meantime, let's stick with cable theft. Go to Jonathan Kaberga. Jonathan, hi.
Yeah, I'm just surprised that City Power has to call in SANDF. Isn't this sabotage? And isn't that a criminal offense?
Yeah.
So my goodness, security guys fighting these criminals, and yet it's a sabotage act against South Africa. So my goodness, it's shocking.
It is incredible that it's happening, Jonathan. I mean, I don't know how we stop it, frankly.
Yeah, I know it's bad.
All right,
anyway, thanks. I wanted to comment.
All right, Jonathan Kaberga, thank you. July, hi. The ANC's decision to postpone the disciplinary hearing of former President Zuma. Go for it.
Yeah, I want to appreciate
a good decision taken by ANC of Ramaphosa for now, because it was not good for them to call a president who is supported by majority in South Africa to go to their house, whereas they know that he's got a very huge support. It was not going to be good to see few people of ANC of Ramaphosa trying to block majority that are supporting president. Was not going to be good at all. So I want to appreciate what they did. And I've got a request to President Ramaphosa. Please, man, you must leave MK alone. We have to go to the free and fair elections. If they win, we'll welcome the result. If they lose, they have to welcome the result. We have to avoid unnecessary tension. What they are doing, going to court, inviting a president of another organization to their house, is provocation. So please, I'm begging him to provide the leadership with regard to this issue of provoking MK.
All right. No, July, I hear you. Thank you. I mean, there are lots of different ways to look at it. Kelvin in Swane, hi. Is it a provocation to cancel the disciplinary commission? Is it a provocation to have the disciplinary inquiry? How do you see it?
Good morning, Stephen. First of all, we must applaud the ANC for, rescheduling this particular meeting. Because like we always say, they've seen that with the security threat analysis, it has proven even in the past that, besides the July unrest, remember that the DA did once march to the Lutuli house and there were a big chaos. So it's a pity that most of the people that were injured were not covered on the, on the screen sort of our TV. But what we can say, it is a wise move because with a high number of unemployment, there's what we call opportunist crime. And people who don't even belong in any political party, they use such opportunities to even loot or cause serious chaos within the CBD. And the economy of Johannesburg was going to come to a standstill. So it is a wise move. And the threat analysis indeed did prove that, it's a no-go area or no-go mission for them to summon President Zuma there.
Okay, I mean, the idea of having one party supporting their leader outside another party because that person is still a member of that party, I don't know, Kelvin, I scratch my head over it a little bit.
Yeah, like we say, myself, as a security expert, I was worried about opportunist crime. Politics, it's another ball game, but, it's a wise move. I think they can, use the opportunity of either using ritual or even sending letters, in relation to give us a reason why we shouldn't suspend you, answer us in so many X amount of days, it has a time frame. There are other remedies that they can use besides summoning someone. Sure. And, on such high number of our youth taking drugs and high number of unemployment, and like we say, opportunist crime always plays a big role in such unrest.
Yeah. All right, Kelvin and Swane, thank you. Nice to hear from you. Bond and Kobach, how's it, Bond?
Good morning, Stephen. Sorry for my voice. I'm fine, and you?
Yeah, I'm all right. Have you been shouting at political rallies over the weekekend?
No. I don't know. It's just something. I just want to... good morning to your listeners. I want to... What is... The entity that is silent in this is the Constitution. I want to humbly try to attempt what does the Constitution of the ANC say about this. And it is regulated by Rule 25. Rule 25 says that if a member is charged of an act of misconduct, the entity in the structure and entity in the ANC that is seized with it, that is competence or jurisdiction, is the disparate committees. The highest one being the National Disparate Committee, Rule 25. Mr. Zuma was charged in January, and the Constitution says that within 6 months, once a charge is served, everything must be finalized within 6 months. The principle being that disparate hearings must be done expeditiously and within a reasonable time. So 6 months ends in July. Elections or no elections, this thing must end in July. Sure. If it doesn't end, the member can apply for the charges to be thrown. In other words, we'll have an anomaly where Mr. Zuma is a member of the MK and also of ANC. So they have to move with speed. I disagree with the reasons for the postponement that there's violence. There will be violence in any event once it's held after the elections, if the MK is going to go there, if at all there's going to be violence. So it does not hold water. But the person also, the entity that is silent is the disciplinary committee. Rule 25, subsection 77 says that the disciplinary committee is the one that has got the prerogative about the date, time, and duration of a meeting. No one else, not even the Secretary General. The Secretary General can only have jurisdiction if he has to shift the venue because of security issues. Just the venue, not the time. So the date and the time and the duration is that of the Disciplinary Committee. It was out of order for the SG to cancel it, unless this thing came from the DC writing to the Secretary General, please, let's shift this. But it was not like that. It's a power play. So I'm going to humbly suggest that whoever advises the SG must advise him to read the Constitution before he talks, because now he's shooting the ANC in the foot about this.
I did wonder about, I wasn't sure that the Secretary General could sort of overrule the timing of a disciplinary inquiry, and you're sort of pointing to that,
Yes, the Constitution says that all national structures must account and report about their activities to the SG, but it doesn't mean he's the boss over them. They account and report to them. He cannot do their work.
Bonden Klaberga, so important. Thank you very much indeed. I mean, disciplinaries in political parties so always sort of political, but there are rules people have to stick to. Bond, always good to hear from you. Thank you. In a moment, Kirk in Cape Town, Richard in Klaberga, 10 minutes, not 20, 10 minutes now to 8.
SAFM, guiding you through the rush hour traffic.
Southern side of Joburg protesting this morning, blocking off the Rand Airport Road, South Rand Road, where it becomes Rand Airport Road effectively. So no through travel and a lot of congestion around the Tulisa Park side of South Rand Road, Heidelberg Junction. A lot of traffic either ending up there or realising they can't get through towards Rand Airport and to the Germiston. So it's all very heavily backlogged. And then just generally through Alberton out towards, what would that be? The other alternative route that links you up there, Wits Rifles Road, effectively. Black Reef Road, Wits Rifles Road, a lot of traffic just diverting that way as well from Tulisa Park up into Germiston, so a lot of congestion. N12 stays heavy into Galulis. That's after an earlier crash and an earlier breakdown at the interchange. The N12 very slow. And there's also a breakdown now on the N3 north getting through Galulis onto the N12, so that's quite heavy again coming through from the Germiston side. A big crash closing down the R103 at Polly Short, so if you're moving between Ashburton and Pietermaritzburg, no movement there at the moment. The R103 is just stationary in heavy backlogs, trying to avoid getting into that mess. Collision on the the M19 at the N2, so in from Reservoir Hills, if you're driving in from Dunkeld, New Germany side, up through Reservoir Hills towards the N2 highway, it's all very heavy. Earlier crash before Queen Nandi Drive has left heavy traffic on the N2 from the M7 through the roadworks as you go up towards that collision scene. And Cape Town, I'm not sure if this truck is being cleared. It was a shipping container blocking Marine Drive at Racecourse Road. The traffic coming out of Tableview is still dead slow on Marine Drive this morning. Bloberg Road into that junction, West Coast to Marine Drive's heavy. Otto du Plessis off the coast down to Dolphin Beach is bad. Bloberg Road queuing effectively from Bayside all the other way going down towards the Kuberg Road. Gee Road, Wood Drive, all of that very heavy. Sandown Road onto Malabongwe out through Parklands North and Rivergate, heavy backlogs as motorists trying to get that way to the N7. So if you're around that Tableview Parklands area, tough Monday morning, make sure you've got plenty of time to get through it all. Rob Byrne, SAFM Traffic.
At SAFM Radio and at Stephen Grootes on Twitter.
Richard on the line from Klaberga. Hi, good morning. Former President Zuma, go for it.
Good morning. Thank you very much. Look, I'm happy that the DC has been postponed. I called it exactly on Friday that the ANC will postpone it, and for the reasons that they have professed to the public. But I want to echo what Bond has just stated. Listening to the SG yesterday, I thought he's not getting the technical and legal advice in handling these matters. I suppose the people that are around him in the office, they should look into professionalizing the office of the SG so that when these matters are dealt with, they are understood that they are bearing on constitutional and legal principles. Take this. He mentioned 4 times Times instruction, it was strange for the ANC SG to speak as to say we've instructed as we have instructed. It simply suggested that there is no coherence behind the closed doors. They are not finding each other. The office of the secretary, the president, and those who were pushing for the DC to sit. Hence, the secretary has to present instruction in the public so that the chairperson and the presenter of the ANC can hear that this is the instruction. And it was wrong. They should have spoken to the presenter of the ANC, the one who will present the charges. Then that presenter who should have spoken now to the chairperson and then speaking directly with President Zuma of his representative to say, let's postpone, find a reason to postpone, find the reason of elections and violence that may come up. But instructing the chairperson, that's where the problem is.
Yeah,
the president in Cape Town did the same. He said, we are speaking to the chairperson. It was wrong for the president to make that statement because they can only speak to the presenter. They can't speak to the chairperson or members of the DC.
Richard and Klabecha, thank you. Yeah, I think there are going to be more issues on this. Kirk in Cape Town, quickly if you can, go for it.
Good morning, Steve. Two issues with this story of Jacob Zuma. The ANC is feeding this euphoria and media campaign that Jacob Zuma is benefiting from by all these crazy notions of suspension and disciplinary action and whatever. I think that they're going about it the wrong way. Number two, Jacob Zuma himself, I cannot believe that a man who are held in such regard previously is prepared to sacrifice the country for his own ambition at 81 years old. He knows he has no limit to his hunger for power, and really it is inexplicable that the ANC is helping this man, and unintentionally, of course. But it is just disaster.
Yeah.
Very sad situation.
All right, Kirk in Cape Town, thank you. I mean, certainly it's one of the big questions, the ANC battling to manage former President Zuma. 5 minutes to 8.
First in the morning, SAFM Sunrise with Stephen Grootes.
From time to time, you'll see provincial governments will put out a press release in which they'll say, and it's quite a difficult subject, how many unclaimed bodies there are in their state mortuaries. In the Western Cape now, they say, the Western Cape Health and Wellness Department, there are more than 300 unidentified bodies, so unclaimed bodies in their mortuaries. 66 of them are children. Vanita Thompson's the Director of Forensic Pathology Services in the Western Cape Health Department in the Western Cape Government. Vanita, good morning and thank you for your time.
Hi, good morning, Stephen. Thank you for the opportunity.
I know that you will almost always, when you're running a situation as big as you are in the Western Cape, you will always have some unclaimed bodies. Is the number higher now than it normally is?
No, I must say we have been managing the situation quite tightly, and it is not as high as it has been historically, but it's still unacceptably high.
I was surprised to see that so many are children, and I say this because usually these bodies are often sort of men or young men. A man might come to the Western Cape, have just arrived, something happens, their relatives don't even know they've left wherever, Gauteng or the Eastern Cape or somewhere, and so I can understand, they don't think to look in the Western Cape. Children are different, though. I was very surprised to see that it's such a high number of children. I thought people would always look for children.
Yes, Stephen, maybe I must also just explain the process a little bit. All human remains that are admitted to us within forensic pathology will have to go through a formal identification process. And I think the number that we stated in terms of the 60-plus number of children was children not yet identified at the time when the report went out. So normally it can take quite a bit of time for the identification process to be completed. And our normal unidentified process, really, in terms of reporting, only kicks off 7 days after a person has been admitted and not yet formally or visually identified. So it could just be because of the time lag at the time of reporting where children were not yet identified.
Okay, I'm with you. So what happens when bodies are not claimed? You obviously try and identify them, you use DNA, you do all sorts of things. What happens if you still can't find their relatives?
Normally, there's quite an involved process, and the identification of the remains is actually the responsibility of the South African Police Service. So we do rely heavily on SAPS to support us. In terms of the process itself, so normally at the time of the post-mortem examination, if the remains have not yet been visually identified or is not visually identifiable, then DNA will be retained obviously at post-mortem, because that's really the only opportunity that we do have. But also during that same period, if fingerprints can be lifted from the remains, then fingerprints are also taken, and these are generally managed through SAPS. So SAPS should either send it first to their local criminal record centre to see if there is a match. If not, then it will be sent on to Home Affairs for verification, and that process can often take quite a long time. So normally, in terms of our legislation, in terms of the National Health Act, we can actually release remains 30 days after admission if it's not yet been identified. But we do feel it's a human rights issue and that we need to really try everything possible to identify the remains.
Sorry. Yes, go on. The remains, the people, so are most of the people victims of violence or accidents or something like that?
It is really all circumstance, and often we would find that, for example, it might be a pedestrian fatality, or it could be skeletal remains. The circumstances will vary depending, and it's case by case.
Thank you very much indeed. Vanita Thompson's Director of the Forensic Pathology Services in the Western Cape Government, the Department of Health there. You're with SFM leading the conversation. Good morning to you. Glad you're with us this morning. It's just gone 8 o'clock.
In our top stories, inquiry finds City of Johannesburg liable for building fire deaths, and police probe farm murder in Bloemfontein. Good morning. The Gampepe Commission of Inquiry into the Usindiso building fire in Johannesburg says action must be taken against the city's property company CEO Helen Botha. The commission found the City of Johannesburg and its entities were liable for the deaths of 77 tenants in the fire that took place in August last year. Scores of others were injured and displaced. Justice Sisi Gampepe released a report yesterday following months of hearings. The report also found the city breached its own bylaws. It has recommended the city hold an internal inquiry aimed at identifying those who failed to carry out their duties, which ultimately led to the fire. Police are investigating an incident related to the murder of an elderly couple at a farm in Glen outside Bloemfontein. Police spokesperson Mahlomola Karedi says a concerned neighbour called officers after he failed to get hold of his neighbours on their cell phones. He says police went to the farmhouse and found the couple's bodies.
The 76-year-old husband's body was found about 300 meters away from the farmhouse, and his 73-year-old wife's body was discovered in the septic tank at the farm. While the search continued, their vehicle, a Toyota Land Cruiser, was found near Majumasweu in Brantford. Preliminary investigations revealed that both victims suffered open wounds on the upper body and were certified dead at the scene. Tools and electronics were stolen from the house.
The Kucha municipality in the Eastern Cape says it's concerned that the outbreak of foot-and-mouth disease in Humansdorp could negatively affect the province's economy. The municipality has launched a campaign aimed at creating the awareness and prevention of the spread of the disease. Anthony Davis is a local veterinarian.
The farm manager sent us photographs, and we couldn't believe it because we have never seen foot-and-mouth disease in this area before. It seems impossible. We know the outbreaks are really far away from us, so initially our thoughts were this can't be happening. But we immediately took samples and sent them off to the OVI. Because the lesions looked so characteristic, the farm was quarantined immediately. And the next day, within 18 hours, we had confirmation that it was in fact foot and mouth. What we also did is we put out a warning to the farmers the same day that we suspected it to ensure that their gates were locked and that they apply good biosecurity.
In election-related news, Residents of Pampierstad in the Northern Cape say they hope they will see the changes ANC Deputy President Paul Mashatile has underlined. Mashatile visited the United Reformed Church during a campaign trail in the area where he said the ANC was committed to improving the lives of South Africans. He says the ANC will continue to serve the people after the elections.
Together we can do more. As we work together, we will do double what we have done in 30 years. We will cross the River Jordan.
And finally, there's growing pessimism over prospects of an imminent ceasefire in Gaza after a surge in violence yesterday saw 3 Israeli soldiers and several Palestinians killed. The soldiers were hit by Hamas rockets at one of the main crossings used to deliver critical aid into Gaza, prompting its closure by the IDF. The BBC's Julian Bedford has more.
The prospect for a ceasefire in Gaza had dwindled before Hamas fired 10 missiles towards the Kerem Shalom crossing. But the deadly attack has resulted in an increase in violence, and later strikes on Rafah has seen several civilian deaths.
Recapping the top story, the Gampepe Commission of Inquiry into the Usindisu building fire in Johannesburg says action must be taken against the city's property company CEO Helen Bottas. For SAFM News, I am Anne Musa.
A very good morning to you in your SFM Sports Headlines. It's soccer, a historic promotion for Magezi FC. They ascend to the DStv Premiership after a stellar season. And in athletics, it's Botswana who clinched gold in the 4x400 meter relays at the World Athletics Relays Championships. All these stories and more just before 8:30.
SAFM, guiding you through the rush hour traffic.
Stays busy in the south of Joburg this morning. Rancho Road, or technically South Rand Road, between the N3 on-ramp and Tulisa Park is closed because of community unrest and protesting. So sort of through Tulisa Park, down through the top of Alberton, and then sort of looping Vitz Rifles and Black Reef Road. It's all heavily congested as motorists look for those alternative routes. Smith Street closed to the Mike 1 Highway due to last week's fire. So expect some disruption around Braamfontein area. And the N3 coming up into Galulis from the south stays heavy. It's a broken down truck on the ramp off the N3 onto the N12 return to Boksburg or the airport. So that run very, very slow. The N1 for this time of morning still jam-packed as well from Malabongwe up towards Rivonia Road. Durban M19, an earlier crash at Reservoir Hills. Traffic coming in is starting to move. That's the good news there. Looks to be as well that crash on the N2 North at Queen Nandi Drive is cleared. So the N2 North is just sort of normalising its queue from the M7 through to the roadworks around Westwood Mall territory. Cape Town's M5 is heavy from Kenilworth up towards the N2, and the whole Tableview area heavily gridlocked today. A stationary shipping container on Marine Drive at Racecourse Road near the paddocks. It means routes like Otto du Plessis coming off the beachfront, Bloberg Road into West Coast Road, Bloberg Road out towards Kuberg Road, Gee Road, Wood Drive, Sandown, Malabongwe, all very extremely backed up. Rob Byrne, SAFM Traffic.
SAFM Sunrise. A vivid start to your day.
6 after 8, good morning. You're with SAFM Sunrise. I'm Stephen Grootes. Glad you're with us this morning. So much to come. We'll talk about the political messaging of political parties. I mean, has any one slogan sort of grabbed you and punched kind of above the other? Sometimes you get a small party that actually comes up with something clever that sort of sticks. I don't know if we're seeing that really this time around. The bigger parties, how are they doing? We'll speak to a communications expert about that. Issues around disinformation or misinformation around new COVID variants. We'll get the sort of details for you on that. And then I'm quite looking forward to this conversation, actually. We'll have a mediated conversation for you from 8:30 about religion and politics. Is there a space for them to be intertwined? Should they stay apart from each other? In a way, in our country, we don't have anything to do with religion and politics, really. You sort of do. In India, it's very different. In other countries, it's very different. And so we'll look at that, all of that to come. You know the number, 086 000 2032. You might well have some strong thoughts about former President Zuma, about Shell planning on leaving South Africa. That's an important story. We'll look at all of that as we go through the morning. Good morning, it's 7 after 8.
In the heart of Africa, where our ancestor spirits echo through the ages, lies a legacy as rich as the soil beneath our feet, the land of our forefathers, which holds the key to our future. For years, the Pan-Africanist Congress of Azania has led the fight for justice, equality, and self-determination. We've been relentless advocates for the people of Africa. As we face a new era, the PAC stays true to our founding principles. We protect our land, preserve our heritage, and shape our future. Let's create a future where every African child can grow with pride, dignity, and hope. Together, let's write the next chapter. It's our land, our legacy, our future. Vote PAC.
This political election broadcast was brought to you in terms of the CASA regulation governing the election period. The views expressed in this political election broadcast are those of the political party and not of the SABC.
Across South Africa, online and on radio. SAFM, let's talk.
8 minutes after 8, good morning. You know the number 086 000 2032. So wherever you drive around at the moment, you're likely to see posters for different political parties. And usually it's a picture of the leader and some sort of message. There's sort of lots of different branding and colours and things. But do posters work? Has political campaigning changed? What's happening behind the scenes? Maybe some of that's a lot more interesting. Well, let's speak to the brand and communications specialist, Sarah Britton. Sarah, good morning.
Good morning, Stephen. Thank you for having me on the show.
I mean, there have been election posters for much longer than we've been a democracy, probably over 100 years. Do election posters still work in the year 2024?
I think, funnily enough, they do. If you don't have election posters up, you don't have a physical presence near where people are living, so it doesn't look like you're important enough or strong enough or credible enough to be worth voting for. So I do think the posters are still important, even though everyone is online on their phones all the time. Sometimes we need to see stuff in real life.
There's something about the physical that has a certain power still.
Yes, exactly. And I think that's why parties still invest in posters. And it's interesting to look at the different strategies because some put up their posters really, really early. Like months ago, Sarah was one of them. And Rise Mzansi was also very early out of the starting blocks. And there was quite a bit of speculation because we only saw, certainly in our area, ANC posters appearing very recently. So, you start wondering why. Do they not have money to advertise? So it's also a way of managing perceptions around you. And if you're not there, then it's a real problem for your brand.
Yeah, they have lots of different messages, and the thing about a poster is it's got to be quite simple. You basically get one, maybe two images. So you've got to have the party logo. You've got to probably have the party leader. That's certainly what tends to happen. And then you sort of get a logo. So even on some of the bigger posters, some of the bigger billboards you see, it's got to be quite simple, right? Is there much you can do with that?
Well, the strategy that parties have been employing, some seem to need a message, and there are those who need a message and those who feel that they don't. So the ones that feel that they don't are the EFF. It's just vote EFF, picture of Julius. And MK also goes for a very simple message because I guess the power of their message is already out there. They don't need to tell their support base why to vote. Whereas the DA, for example, has saved, rescue South Africa. The ANC is, let's buy, I've suddenly forgotten what their line is, but it's something about doing something together. So it's interesting that parties that feel that they're less, that they don't have a clear message need to be the ones who put out a message on those posters.
Is there room for misunderstanding? So, for example, red in Afrikaans means rescue, if I remember correctly.
Yes, right.
Yeah, and, you have these billboards, these DA posters, blue, the red South Africa is in red. And, I mean, sometimes I think you could drive past that and say, is that a comment about Julius Malema? I don't know. I mean, do they want South Africa to be red rather than rescued? I mean, do you need to be quite careful where you've got so many different languages in our country that you've actually got to be quite careful how you phrase things?
Yes, exactly. I mean, it causes a bit of cognitive dissonance to see that. And I think sometimes they don't research the areas very well where they're putting up posters. So I live in an area that is predominantly English-speaking. Very few Afrikaans speakers in the area I live, and there are a lot of Afrikaans language posters around. And you think, well, why would you do that? Don't you research? So I think, some of these strategies do need refining. I think what's interesting for me as a marketing person who's worked in shopper marketing in the past, I think an election is a lot like shopping in a supermarket, where you're looking at all of these different colors, you're looking for a logo on that ballot sheet, and the message has to be so simple. It has to prompt action. And most of the parties are not using a very simple call to action. They just, they're making a statement like a job in every home or we need new leaders, which for me, is a bit of a strange message because it's not prompting action. It's just making a statement, a general statement about things. So I also find that interesting, and it'll be fascinating to see how Rise and Zanti in particular does, because from a share of voice, from a share of conversation point of view, they are dominating. Certainly in social media, where I do spend a lot of my time.
I'm going to come to social media in a moment. In some elections, in societies where voters are perhaps closer to each other, so we have such the highest levels of racialized inequality that we forget sometimes how political parties kind of often tend to focus on certain groups. In places like the US and the UK, parties used to go for the floating voter. That was what mattered, was the floating voter could determine an election. And two messages for me stand out in the sort of last 30 years. The one is in a British election, which had a picture. It was an advert, I think, for the Conservative Party, which had a picture of a very long queue of people, and it just said Labour isn't working. And the point was, or Britain isn't working, the point was that unemployment was high with those policies. There was also Bill Clinton's first presidential campaign, and the phrase there, which is quite a strange phrase but worked, was, it's the economy, stupid. And so those two phrases, to me, were examples of where very clever marketing, a phrase, came to dominate an election. I don't know if that happens in our politics, maybe because of the structure of our society. Is there still space for someone to do that?
I'd love to see somebody do that. But I think, our politics are pretty fragmented, and, people tend to still vote for people who look like them. And that seems to have become an increasing tendency. You've got parties that certainly play very strongly on the ethnic identity of their base. So I think that kind of politics is still, it's still a way away. Probably the closest is, I think, Action SA, only action will fix SA. I think that's quite a clever line, and I think it's good and memorable. And they own the color green, and they haven't relied too much on Herman Mashaba's image. It's really about the party and the ideas. And then, we need new leaders. Yes, we certainly do need new leaders, but those are not anywhere near the lines that you described.
Could it be harder to assess how effective marketing is? And this is where the sort of social media conversation comes from. So let me sort of try and simplify this a little bit in my own head. It may have been 30 or 40 years ago that you could judge the mood of an electorate by posters. Maybe even in the 1990s, early 2000s, you could probably have done that here. You could see which party had more resources. You could see where they were targeting their resources. You could go to rallies and see how many people came. You may be able to conduct some polling, but you'd be able to get a sense of which parties were doing well and which parties were not. One of the things that I find very intriguing is that due to the closed nature of WhatsApp groups, due to the fact that I don't know which TikTok channels people are watching, for example, it's actually harder to know who's making an impact and who isn't. And does that mean, here and in other countries, you could have more surprise election results because we can't actually assess how all of that's landing? In the past, you kind of could. Now maybe you can't in the virtual world.
Well, there has been a history of parties that make a very big impact in social media and don't make quite as big an impact in the real world. And that is going to be an interesting one for me because there are clearly certain parties who are better at generating conversation online and getting attention online. And the only test of that will be the results, the election results, because you can look very good online. You can really dominate. You can have a trending hashtag every single day. But if people don't actually vote for you, well, what was that for? So and I am not going to predict anything. I'm just very interested to see how Rise and Zansi does, because they've been accused of both being the DA light and the ANC light, and I think they've crafted their message well, and they've picked the right fights on Twitter, now known as X, and yeah, that'll tell us quite a lot about how effective marketing in other channels is, apart from the traditional, boots on the ground going from door to door saying, please vote for me.
Sarah Britton, thank you very much indeed. Brand and Communications Specialist. Really appreciate the time.
Conversations that you connect with and react to. SAFM.
All right, taking your calls this morning. You know the number 086 000 2032. Sandra and Olifantsfontein. Is it Sandra? Hi, good morning.
Yes, morning, Stephen. How are you?
I'm well. Go for it. You want to talk about Tembisa High? What's happened?
There is a couple of fights that's been happening there. The fight that happened, luckily that actually it went on the media. Those other fights are not happening on the media. Let me tell you, there are a couple of fights. There is a crisis there in that school. There is a crisis in that school. There are a couple of fights that happened last month in April. Those fights, they ended up being put to kind of punish the whole entire school. Because right now, kids have only one break. Mm-hmm. The other break has been taken away because there were fights. They are not involved in those fights, but the entire school. There are TAs there that are always, when there is a break, they are outside. The other fights happened when the parents were coming to collect their kids. They were in the ground, those fights. One day, how can one day 5 fights happen in the school?
Sure.
And then there's no crisis.
Sandra, is this fighting between learners or fighting between learners and teachers?
Between learners. These are the fights between learners. We don't know whether it's a gang-related thing, but these fights are happening between the learners. And because they don't come to the media. Right now, the whole school, they only got one break, not 2 breaks.
Sure.
One of the parents calls the school, and then to find out from the principal why the entire school has been punished for couple of kids. Then person that answered the call, that's an acting that Miss Sijaka, I will tell because that's what she said. She said, you know what, ma'am, can you just rather do this? Give us the letter that your kid is sick so that we can exclude that child. How can you exclude? She said, no, don't generalize it. How can you say don't generalize it when you want to find out from the principal that why is the entire, because there is cameras in the school. Why can't the cameras be the ones that can see that, you know what, these are the couple of kids that were fighting, that those kids need to be punished or they need to be admitted because with their parents. But no, the whole entire school.
And Sandra, are your children there?
Yes, I do have a child there.
Okay, sure, very difficult. All right.
It is difficult. And then on top of that, because you know what, there is not, even with the SGBs, there's not proper communications with the parents. You can't just send the message, then you said, okay, fine, this is the message that we relied on to the parents. On top of that, the school has decided, no, now with the books, actually, parents must buy the textbooks. Yeah. Up until now, you pay 24,000. That school is 24,000, but it's a public school. 24,000 for your child. The next thing you have to buy school books because the school won't give you the books anymore.
Sure. Sandra and Olifantsfontein, thank you. Okay, on the line from Tembisa High, talking about Tembisa High there. This is a very serious story. Let's see if we're able to do much. I don't know if we can. I'm not going to make promises, but we'll try. Sandra, thank you. On the line from Soweto, Bishop Brink. Hello, sir. You're actually a bishop, right?
Yes, I am, sir.
Okay. In which church?
From the Full Gospel Church.
All right, go for it. You want to talk about former President Zuma?
Yes, the cancellation of the disciplinary issue, because some analysis that I'm getting, it seems like there's an impression that maybe the ANC didn't give it a thought. But the other side of the coin, like you said, that there are too many ways to think about it. The other side of the coin could be that they are playing political mind games to provoke them as well. And then secondly, if you look at the reasons, either way, if there's going to be violence, there will be violence, and it's even going to be worse after the elections because then there will be tensions and all that. So I think they're playing some sort of mind games, and trying to just provoke the situation there, just being political. Thank you so much.
All right. Bishop Brink, thank you. On the line from Soweto, 22 minutes after 8.
Nna lebitso la ka ke Bonolo Moahlodi Bantswang ba re ke Miss B, Morara Miss T, Moahlodi, the Bonnie B Bonbon. And we'll be now playing Kena on Mondays at 4:30. The day has changed, but the time slot hasn't. So if you're interested in news that's happening with us kids and our peers around the world, don't forget to tune in. See you there.
Rise to the occasion with Season 5 of The Taste Master SA, Tuesday evenings at 7 on SABC2. Follow the delicious journey as 14 of the country's best baking talents compete to impress the judges and claim the title. Only one will be crowned the Taste Master and win the grand prize valued at more than 400,000 Rand. That's Tuesdays at 7, repeat Wednesdays at 1 and Sundays at 4 p.m. on SABC2.
The National Pulse with Ashraf Garda.
Have they elaborated in terms of the lateral documentation, in terms of what is the hearing about?
Well, in the charge sheet, they have a number of charges that they've stipulated there. And there's a number of other issues that they raised in terms of him having contravened some of their procedures and policies.
What is his reaction?
No, President Zuma is not perturbed at all, and President Zuma is not a coward. He will appear and he'll be present.
Why will he appear? I'm just trying to understand it. I know he's technically still a member of the ANC, but he's with another party.
Well, I mean, President Zuma has always said that he's always been a member of the ANC and he'll die an ANC member. And he's always said that. But however, he cannot campaign for the ANC of Cyril Ramaphosa that is bought.
Ntlamulo Ndlela, the MK party spokesperson.
The National Pulse with Ashraf Garda. Weekdays, 3 to 6 p.m. At SFM Radio and at Stephen Grootes on Twitter.
KG on the line from Mangaung. KG, hi, good morning. The Zuma Disciplinary Committee, how do you see it? Go for it.
I think that DC should have proceeded without interest, Stephen.
Yeah.
These excuses that these people are coming with, I think even my 6-year-old child will come up with better reasons. For example, you can easily schedule that DC to sit at a place where access is very tightly controlled.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, I mean, I remember as a reporter covering Julius Malema's disciplinary, and they moved it from place to place because there was violence outside on the first day.
Stephen, could easily, there's lounges, there's everything at King Shaka Airport, at Ouartambo Airport. You schedule it there. You know, at places like that, it's not every Dick, Tom, and Harry who can just walk in and out as when they feel like it. So yeah. It takes a lot. You know, this way of handling this DC.
Yeah.
Disregarding processes and procedures and what is written in their own constitution as quoted by people who've read it, who know it. It's the same way that South Africa was run as a country, without process, without due regard to anything. And lastly, on my part, Stephen, I just want to advise the governing party itself. They must not be too worried about the conduct of our president. You know, this allegation that he's disrespecting Cyril Ramaphosa, I don't agree with that personally. I think he's got no respect for himself personally. That is why you would find that, for example, at the previous ANC conference, when the ANC president started speaking, he staged a grand entrance.
Yeah.
Only a person who's got
I remember that. Yes, he arrived late. Yes.
Yes.
Was that the policy conference in 2022, I think, maybe?
Yes.
Yeah.
Steven, there's as a human being, there's certain morally and generally acceptable standards of conduct and of behavior. You don't behave as a person who's got no brain inside your head. You know, even if you are, however, aggrieved with the other person, still certain standards that you as a person must uphold. And failure to uphold such standards and to behave like I don't even want to call it a thug or something. It says a lot about yourself, the individual, not the other person.
Yeah.
You know. Thank you, Steve.
Thank you, KG on the line from Mangaung. Really do appreciate the time. Yeah, very interesting idea. 27 minutes after 8.
This is SAFM Sport with Zai Khan.
Zai, good morning. Magesi FC, they promoted?
You look out, yeah, they come. They're moving up the Premiership. I think they really want to show what they're made of. They are the ones that clinched the Motsepe Foundation Championship title with 2 matches to spare. They had a 3-1 win against Milford FC at Old Peter Mokaba Stadium yesterday. Magesi went to 55 points, giving them an unassailable 8-point lead over second place University of Pretoria, and they were on 47 points. They were held to a 2-2 draw away to 10th place Black Leopards at the Thohoyandou Stadium. Elsewhere, Manchester United boss Erik ten Hag believes Jadon Sancho's Champions League performance for Borussia Dortmund showed why he is a high-value player. Now, the 24-year-old winger, Sancho, struggled to live up to the hype after joining United from the German club in 2021 and was banished last September after claiming on social media that he had been made a scapegoat. Sancho hit out after Ten Hag claimed he had not reached the level required to be involved in their squad, and he did not feature for United.
So let's see this. Yesterday he played very good, and we talked more about it. He's a very good player, and yesterday he showed why Manchester United bought him. He showed also that he represents a high value for Manchester United. So which is good, and so I'm happy for Jadon with his performance from yesterday, and we will see what's going to happen in the future.
On to rugby now, where Argentina, playing for the HSBC Sevens League title, came back hard in the second half of their 5th place playoff to edge the Springbok Sevens 14-10, and that's in the team's final clash in Singapore. Despite an unbeaten run in their last 3 pool matches, the Blitzboks unfortunately went down 29-24 to Australia in the quarterfinal. But nevertheless, the Blitzbok head coach Philip Snyman was not too upset with the Blitzboks performance.
We started off fantastically. We had a plan going into that game, and I think the first 5 minutes we were very clinical. We did everything textbook. The team showed if you keep the ball we can score tries, but then again you can't only play for 5 minutes rugby and then try to defend your score and do things out of character. You'll never be able to, especially against a team like Argentina.
And finally, athletics. Team USA swept 4 out of 5 finals at the World Athletics Relays taking place in the Bahamas. Botswana claimed the title in the men's 4x400 meter relay, and it was a great run by Team South Africa, their men's 4x400 meter team, taking second place in their heat, booking their place in the final and qualifying for the Paris Olympics. More sport for you in SAFM comes around 12:30. I'm Zai Khan.
Zai, thank you. Religion and politics. That's next. You with SAFM leading the conversation. 8:30.
Good morning. In the headlines, Gauteng Premier Panyaza Sufi says the provincial government and the city of Johannesburg will establish a joint committee which will ensure the implementation of the recommendations of the Gampepe Commission of Inquiry. The inquiry into the Usindiso building fire released its report yesterday, following months of hearings. Police are investigating an incident related to the murder of an elderly couple at a farm in Glen outside Bloemfontein. And the people of Chad are voting for new president today after 3 years of military transition under General Mahatma Debi. I'll have details on these and other stories at 9.
SAFM, guiding you through the rush hour traffic.
It was a nasty little backlog of traffic in Pretoria this morning. Waltloo, Watermeyer and Pretoria Street. Busy routes at this time of morning, and they're all badly backed up around a stationary truck obstruction. Apart from that, Pretoria just looking a bit slow on Capital Park, Paul Kruger, and then as you come after that into the CBD on Paul Kruger. It's a busy route these days in from the north. Joburg crash N1 south at William Mandela, so just after Ravonia on your way down to Four Ways, it all backs up. Stationary truck stuck on the N3 north, ramping onto Galuli's, return to the N12 or R24. So the N3 coming around from Germiston and Alberton stays heavy for this time of morning. Plenty of pressure on the Mike 1 Boysons right through to around about sort of Oxford Road before you feel like you're out of that delay. Pietermaritzburg down to Ashburton, the R103, a crash at Polly Shorts earlier. Just a little bit of traffic backlogging southbound from Market Road area. The N2 north up to Kumashu, that's all of a sudden getting busy. The earlier crash behind that at Queen Nundy Drive has been cleared up. And Cape Town Marcel, it would appear that the stationary container, shipping container on Marine Drive's Milnerton section at Racecourse Road is probably being cleared. There's busy conditions coming along the coast, but not the big backlog. The big backlog still battling out of Tableview. Roads like the West Coast Road, Otto du Plessis along the beachfront, Bloberg Road, both ways at Bayside, and again down towards the Coburg Road, Gee Road, Wood Drive, Janssens, Malabongwe, Sandown. Very heavy in the Tableview area this morning. Rob Byrne, SAFM Traffic.
Mediated conversation on SAFM.
27 minutes to 9, the time for your mediated conversation this morning. Yesterday, there was an interfaith event involving the SA Council of Churches and politicians from several different parties where everyone paid for peace and a free and fair election. At the event, the leader of the DA, COPE, the UDM, Action SA, the Gauteng Premier, the ANC's Panyaza Lesufi, was also there. Meanwhile, earlier yesterday, President Cyril Ramaphosa had been at another church in Cape Town where he said that the church had always supported South Africa. So then, as we head into elections, should religion and religious leaders play a role in our politics? Technically, legally, South Africa is a secular country, but millions and millions of people carry a strong faith, which means that religious leaders could have power in our politics. And who could forget the role that religious leaders played during apartheid and how they were able to play a hugely important role during the transition to democracy. But many other religious groups try to stay out of politics directly, may prefer to stay out of it completely. So then, is there a role for religious groups in our politics or not? First this morning, Professor Dion Forster is the Professor of Public Theology at the Free University of Amsterdam in the Netherlands and a research fellow at the Beyers Naudé Centre for Public Theology at the University of Stellenbosch. Then one of the organisers of yesterday's event, the Acting General Secretary of the South African Council of Churches, Reverend Mzondile Molo. And finally, the political analyst, Dr. Levi Ndo from the Tshwane University of Technology. We start then with the theologian, Professor Dion Forster. Professor Forster, good morning.
Morning, Stephen. Morning, colleagues.
From the very beginnings of human civilization, there's often been a link or a relationship between politics and religion, sometimes an explicit link between the people who ruled a society and those who were proclaimed as a god. I presume we're talking about a sort of tension or a dynamic or a relationship between politics and religion that goes back probably 6,000 years.
Yeah, Stephen, absolutely. I mean, the one thing we have to acknowledge is that all faiths are inherently political because the aims that they have very often are moral and social. So if you think about things like justice and mercy, provision and care, taking care of one's neighbors, these are all political ideals. And it doesn't take a lot of scratching to get below the surface of the teachings of the Prophet Muhammad or of Jesus in the Bible to see that they do have political implications. I think where the tension has often come in is where religious leaders, whose primary task is not a political task but a religious task, have adopted political stances. And then, of course, on the other side, where political leaders whose primary task should be service and justice and ensuring the freedoms and safety of their citizens, end up pandering towards certain religious groupings. And I think that's where the sort of tension comes in. But I would say it's naive to think that politics doesn't interface with religion and religion doesn't interface with politics. One last thing I'd say is, Stephen, you may be aware that the 2022 household survey statistics have just been released. The embargo was lifted. And once again, South Africa has shown an increase in religiosity. 86% of South Africans now say that they are Christian. That's up by about 1.8% from the last statistics. And South Africa is one of only 3 nations in the world where there's been an increase in formal religiosity in public life. So we do have a slightly different role between religion and politics than the sort of general separation of church and state that you might see, for example, in America or in England.
Why are we seeing an increase in religiosity against the trend? Is it because perhaps of the crisis or crises that our society is in?
Yeah, so there is actually research on this. I've written on this myself. What we do see is that wherever persons find that the sort of secular systems of society either exclude them or fail them, so these are political systems, economic systems, people feel disempowered, they're trapped in a cycle of poverty, very often what they then tend to do is they tend to become more religious. So they trust in the higher power, the God, the Savior, who is who is believed to have more power than the politicians or the business leaders of the time. Now, certainly we can see that people make meaning of their life, and this is an important fact in all societies. I mean, I see it in Amsterdam when I'm there as well. People recognize that you can't account for everything in life simply by economic or political science means, that there is something there which is, slightly more textured. And so what we're seeing certainly in South Africa is that people are really trusting in their God to give them the ability to overcome, for example, corruption or the disappointment that they're seeing with service delivery or with leaders.
If we look at the situation in our society, I mean, is there a clear role for religious groups in politics? I mean, often we have events like we had yesterday, religious leaders coming together with a very diverse group of politicians and sort of praying for peace. Should religious groups be more assertive than that, or is that as far as they should go?
No, I think that an event like the one that happened yesterday is entirely appropriate. I think what Reverend Molo and the South African Council of Churches are doing is something that we've seen in South Africa. Stephen, where I become a little bit nervous, and I've seen this over the years with the work that we've done in public theology, is when you encounter a society that tries to deny the fact that people are inherently religious. Now, just to say what you mentioned earlier is actually not entirely correct. South Africa actually doesn't have a secular democracy. We have a far more progressive constitution. We have a far more progressive constitution that recognizes that people are religious. And what we do is we protect the right to religion, so people can hold their beliefs, they can practice them, but also the right from religion, that no person should be subjected to the religious beliefs of another unjustly. Now, I think in a society like ours, where 9 out of 10 people hold explicit religious faith, it would be inappropriate to exclude the religious from the political. But I think this is where Denise Ackerman, professor of theology at the University of Western Cape in the 1980s, I remember at an event said, religious leaders, religious communities should be engaged but never embedded. It becomes dangerous, for example, when the ruling party pitches up at a service and asks to use the mic, or even the opposition. That's not the place where we should allow party politics to operate. But certainly our religious leaders and our religious communities are far closer to the people than the branches of our political parties. I mean, just think about this. There are more churches in South Africa than there are branches of the ANC. And people are far more reliant for nutrition, early childhood development, for meaning-making, support on the church than they are on any other structure in society. So to say that those persons shouldn't be political, I think, is naive.
I've watched over the years some politicians trying to get close to religious leaders and some religious leaders almost trying to get closer to politicians. I can remember one case where a religious leader, it seemed to me, was getting closer and closer to a politician and then suddenly started to walk away. And it seemed to me that maybe, in fact, their own church sort of disapproved of that. Is there often that kind of little dance? These are two people who may get power from each other, but they actually need to manage it very carefully. People need to be very careful with how they manage this.
Yeah, so Stephen, if you think about the ways in which societies are structured, there are three general spheres in society. We have what we would call the private sector, and their aim is economic gain. And then you have on the other side what we would call the sort of public sector, the political sector, and their aim is political gain. The church, together with other civil society organizations, should have neither economic nor political power in mind. What they should want is to serve the interests of the people, the common good. However, it's not that easy. I mean, churches need money, they need social influence in order to run, and often they're tempted to come closer to those centers of economic wealth or power. The Kairos document in 1985 really pointed this out very strongly with the relationship between the Dutch Reformed Church and the National Party. In my own research, I must declare that I'm a Methodist. I've worked quite a bit on this. 63% of parliamentarians say that they are Methodists. Nelson Mandela was a Methodist. Ace Magashule is a Methodist. It's still the largest mainline denomination in South Africa. And there's a dangerously close relationship. Why? Because the governing party needs a kind of moral sanction from this church, where the majority of South Africans are attached, to say, well, we are your party. Our political aims relate to the sort of social, religious aims that you have. And very often what we find is that religious leaders are saying, well, we need the influence and the provisions and the protection and even the financing of the state in order to do what we think is good work. So that's a very careful tension that we need to maintain. So I would simply go back again to say that, if we elect persons to power and service, their responsibility is to serve the needs of the people, and therefore the churches do have a right to engage the state or the government, but never to be on the side of a political party, never to, for example, appoint a chaplain to the governing party. I mean, those things are exceptionally dangerous because, it's very difficult to criticize Caesar when you dine with him.
Professor, thank you very much indeed. Professor Dion Forsters, Professor of Public Theology at the Free University of Amsterdam in the Netherlands and Research Fellow at the Beyers Naudé Centre for Public Theology at the University of Stellenbosch. 17 minutes to 9 the time. Your mediated conversation this morning, the relationship between politics and religion. Let's speak now to the Acting General Secretary of the South African Council of Churches, the Reverend Mzwandile Molo. Father Molo, good morning and thank you for your time.
Good morning, Stephen, and good morning to your listeners.
What aim or what role is your organisation trying to play when you host so many political leaders at one event as you did last night?
Thank you, Stephen. Let me just try and correct one or two small little things, Stephen. The service was not for political parties, it was for South Africans. In that program that we had yesterday, we had time for the IEC, which we believe plays a crucial role in the running and organizing of our elections. We also spent time with the police, whom we believe play a critical role in securing the elections and making sure that intimidation and violence doesn't prevail over us. We spent time actually praying for the journalists. The leader of SANEP was part of us yesterday because we believe that the media plays a very critical role in informing our society. And because we believe a society that is not informed by fair, accurate and correct analysis is ill-informed to make the necessary decision that it takes. So the service yesterday, therefore, was an attempt to say the election process in our country is not a party political matter, it's a national matter. It is a matter that all of us must take a serious interest in. Sorry?
No. Please, I didn't mean to interrupt you. Keep going.
Okay, so it is a national thing that we must all invest ourselves in. And when we then brought the political parties into the moment of prayer, which is only one section of the moment of prayer for the election, was to remind them of their common commitment to the country, and whatever the results of the elections are, whoever governs will govern because they're representing our people and they represent the dreams of our people. Whoever will not win the governing majority must have the knowledge that it is honor to serve in the opposition benches, because when they do that, they extend the responsibility of accountability that our people have. So it was almost a kind of a claim to say these elections are not merely not a stage for party politics, party political activities only. It is a national effort given to us by the Constitution and also given to us as Christians by the God to expect of us to be co-creators with God in shaping the future.
Is there ever a role, do you think, for a group like yours or for an organised religious group to go further than you did yesterday? I mean, could a religious group ever say explicitly, this party is wrong or this party is right or something like that? Or do you think you've gone kind of as far as you can in the current circumstances, or as far as you should, let me use that word, in the current circumstances?
Firstly, Stephen, the SACC has a history of standing up for injustice, both before apartheid and after apartheid. In actual fact, we ended our service yesterday to saying to everybody, the fact that we pray for you as political parties doesn't give you a blank check into the future. Where things go wrong, we will stand up and say, according to our belief in God and the evidence before us, what you're doing is wrong. And therefore, we do not stop by saying, oh, we prayed for you, then go in elections, and if you win the elections, then we are going to keep ourselves quiet. No. We are also saying to South Africans, please do not mortgage your democracy. The democratic journey does not start at the moment of voting and then folding our arms. We must fight corruption every day. We must heal our nation every day. We must fight gender-based violence every day. We must fight poverty every day. From our local churches to our national churches, all moments and times need to be done. Where we are very careful at this juncture, Stephen, Firstly, we are also very careful of giving too much trust on human institutions. If you stand today and say, this is my party, I want to go with them and everything, be careful, because human condition means that within all of us we have got the good and the bad. So if you give yourself to that party, you end up then being beholden to that. At the same time, we are also saying that when we are able to be in a process of electioneering, let's allow our political parties to propagate their ideas, allow them to contest their views without using our sacred spaces for them to contest with our people by dividing therefore. And then when the time is right, we will mount campaigns where we must fight against poverty, we must fight against corruption, things like that we stand for. And therefore we have no qualms as the SACC to say to Stephen, South Africans, we don't commit only to this journey of the elections, but we also commit to the journey of transforming the lives of our people.
It seems that some religious groups are blessing political leaders, and if they haven't yet, they may well. Closer to the elections, leaders will attend services and things like that. Is that too close? I mean, should religious leaders draw the line before doing that? If they have a political leader during the election campaign on one Sunday, should they have a different political leader the next Sunday, or can they show favourites?
The SACC it has no regulatory power to tell any church what it must do wherever it wants to do it. But we've encouraged those who are members of the SACC to say to them, firstly, be careful of taking the sacred space where people are to be united and using that moment to divide the people. Because the presumptive position of the SACC is the majority of our political parties have supporters who are in front of us in the queues. It's very rare to find one church in a local congregation that supports one political party. It will be something strange to have that kind of situation. The majority of our people have diverse views on the political parties they trust, on the political leaders that they trust. Secondly, Stephen, there is an imagination that is greater than any political manifesto that we must always profess. An imagination of seeing life radically different to what political parties might promise. And that then elevates for our own thinking and our own understanding of life and therefore understanding of God to a point whereby once you take a political party and make that political party a God for your church, for your congregation, you are minimizing God's appeal to the broad people of South Africa. There is a God of justice who will always rise above whatever our political parties are professing before us. And that's what we want to hold dear and encourage political churches to be very careful of aligning themselves so close to our political parties that our people see themselves nothing more than as mouthpieces for political parties.
Reverend Mzwandile Molo, thank you very much indeed. Acting General Secretary of the South African Council of Churches. In a moment, the political analyst, Dr. Livian Daw.
SAFM, guiding you through the rush hour traffic.
Still reasonably heavy on Joburg's N3 this morning. An earlier breakdown on the link off the N3 north onto the N12 has been cleared, but it's just sort of left residue, a backlog of rush hour traffic. Moving slowly, Cement Factory up into Galuli's. M2 going to sit in some heavy traffic from Joe Slovo going west into Crown Interchange, and the Mike 1 up through the Crown stays busy as far as Oxford Road this morning. Crash on the M1 south at Winnie Mandela, quite a heavy queue you'll pick up there just after the Ravonia Road exit. And the N1 through Midrand, still busy. Traffic looks like just pressure of volume between Old Joburg Road and the point just after Olifantsfontein. The R21 towards the airport, queuing at Clayville. We enter a new week, but no change. The double lane closure on the R21 approaching Olifantsfontein Road, still very much there. R103 route, Polly Shorts, Pietermaritzburg to Ashburton. That scene is being cleared. That traffic is starting to move through. And Cape Town, the stationary, or the shipping container that got in the way this morning, Marine Drive at Racecourse Road, appears to have been cleared, but still very heavy backlogging through Tableview. Marine Drive coming through Sunset Beach is heavy. Bloberg Road is heavy into Marine Drive and West Coast Road. Bloberg Road going the other way towards Kuberg Road's heavy. Gee Road, Janssens, Wood Drive, even the Kuberg Road down passing Macro and on your way to Milnerton. It's all very slow going. Rob Byrne, SAFM Traffic.
I want to talk to this girl, but I'm shy, bro. Come on, go talk to her, bro. It's a masquerade party. Plus, the ladies love a man with a bit of mystery. Don't worry, we got you. Hey, girl.
I just want to know who's behind that mess. From the moment I saw you, you stole my heart. Can I please get your number, babe? And I'll take you out. I promise to love you forever, and this I vow.
I'll show you my face if you show me yours.
Let's face it, when you channel your inner superstar, every moment turns into a musical. Catch The Masked Singer SA, Saturdays at 6:30 p.m. and see who's hiding behind the mask. Channel A Better You with S3. S3, open up.
Support Slipper Day on the 31st of May and help children like me fighting life-threatening illnesses to reach their dreams. Visit reachfordream.org.za and make a difference. And don't forget to step into your slippers on Slipper Day. Reach for a Dream, inspiring hope. This is an SABC-supported initiative.
Mediated conversation on SAFM.
Continue your mediated conversation this morning about politics and religion at 17 minutes to 9 here on SAFM. Dr. Levi Ndors, political analyst at the Tshwane University of Technology. Dr. Ndors, good morning. Thanks for your time this morning.
Good morning to you, Stephen. Good morning to the listeners at home. Thank you for having me.
Do we know our country has millions of people who carry a deep faith? Do religious groups have political power in our society? It's a sort of slightly different question. We haven't seen them assert their political power, but do they have it?
I think they do, in the sense that these same people who go to church every Sunday and participate actively in the activities of the church are the beneficiaries of the policies of government. They are at the same time active participants in many activities happening in society, and at the same time, whether good or bad, they can participate in influencing the direction in which government is supposed to take.
Do you think that power could grow if we're becoming a more religious society, or if politicians are in a space where every single vote matters? Religious leaders might find they have more power than they've had in the past.
Well, I think it will be important for religious leaders to keep their lane and focus on religion, deal with issues of morality, good behavior, and ensuring that people are nourished spiritually, and leave politicians to focus on what they do. But at the same time, you need religious leaders to constantly have their voice on matters of morality, on matters that relate to good governance, on matters that relate to good citizenry and patriotism, because it is the church and religious groups that are on a numerous basis busy shaping the behavior of many citizens.
Is there a risk that if a politician is blessed by the leader of one faith, then the leader of another faith may turn against them? I mean, politics doesn't seem to work quite like that. I mean, there are some places where politics and religion are completely intertwined. Think Lebanon, for example, or maybe in some other places in the Middle East, or India to an extent. Here, for the moment, it doesn't seem to be like that. But could it ever change?
The unfortunate part is that these politicians, before they become active politicians, they are members of society and they are members of different religious groups, and they attend churches. And in one way or another, some of them would also be encouraged by some church members to enter into politics. And in their own responsibilities as church leaders, they would also give blessings to such. But what, in my view, would create a controversy would be a situation in which certain political leaders are only seen in certain churches only during specific times or during elections. And I think that is where we have an area of concern. But at the same time, religious as we are, it will not be surprising to see politicians also wanting to go and get divine interventions from churches like what we're actually seeing happening currently.
There's so many other aspects that are playing out at the moment. But I would imagine that leaders, religious leaders and politicians have to manage the relationship quite closely. And in many societies, you see that a blessing from, to use the Christian religion for a moment, a bishop or an archbishop, that blessing can be really quite important. I get the sense maybe that our politicians are a little wary of getting too close, both sides of this, just a little wary of getting too close, mixing religion and politics.
They would love to do so, and for many reasons. Prof has indicated that there are more churches in South Africa than branches of political parties. And in one way or another, politicians would love to have an endorsement from certain influential church leaders. And in doing so, they will try their best to get much closer to such people. But it will also be important for the church leaders to be very, very careful of how they conduct their business, because in the same church, you will get members of different political parties, and that would have a potential to compromise such church leaders. So they need to be able to draw a clear line between themselves and politicians so that it should not be as visible and clear to everyone to see that there is an endorsement of a particular politician or a political party.
Dr. Levi Ndor, thank you very much indeed, the political analyst at the Tshwane University of Technology. My thanks also to the Reverend Mzwandile Molo, Acting General Secretary of the South African Council of Churches, and starting us off today, Professor Dion Forster, Professor of Public Theology at the Free University of Amsterdam in the Netherlands and Research Fellow at the Beyers Naudé Centre for Public Theology at the University of Stellenbosch. Well, we will be with you tomorrow. Kathy is, of course, next. Thank you for being with us this Monday morning. From Mdu, Melissa, Stanza Zelma, myself, look after yourself. You're with SFM leading the conversation. Good morning. It's 9 o'clock.
In our top stories, Lesotho, to ensure Khampepe recommendations are implemented and voting takes place for a president in Chad. Good morning. Gauteng Premier Panyaza Lesufi says the provincial government and the City of Johannesburg will establish a joint committee which will ensure the implementation of the recommendations of the Khampepe Commission of Inquiry. The inquiry into the Usindiso building fire released its report yesterday, following months of hearings. The Commission's findings include the liability of the City of Johannesburg and its entities for the deaths of the 77 mostly foreign residents. The blaze, which ravaged the building in August last year, also led to injuries and displacements. Lesufi says he will ensure the Commission's recommendations are implemented as soon as possible.
We'll establish the joint implementation committee between the province and the municipality so that some of the recommendations we can move with speed to implement them. I think you're quite aware that witness X or witness Y, I'm not sure who's that one, has already appeared in court. We'll then request additional information from the SAPS, and if they need additional information from us on the basis of this report, we are.
Police are investigating an incident related to the murder of an elderly couple at a farm in Glen outside Bloemfontein. Police spokesperson Mahlomola Karedi says a concerned neighbor called officers after he failed to get hold of his neighbors on their cell phones. He says police went to the farmhouse and found the couple's bodies.
The 76-year-old husband's body was found about 300 meters
meters away from the farmhouse, and his 73-year-old wife's body was discovered in the septic tank at the farm. While the search continued, their vehicle, a Toyota Land Cruiser, was found near Majmasweu in Brantford. Preliminary investigations revealed that both victims suffered open wounds on the upper body and were certified dead at the scene. Tools and electronics were stolen from the house.
In election-related news, some young people in Papierstad in the Northern Cape have spoken out about the impact of unemployment on them. They interacted with the ANC Deputy President Paul Mashatile after his service at the United Reformed Church. Mashatile, who was on a campaign trail to the area, said the ANC was committed to improving the lives of South Africans. The young people have urged Mashatile to ensure his party honors its commitment to create jobs.
We are extremely happy because it's been a while that we wanted the Deputy President to come this side and also the Premier of the Northern Cape to come this side.
We need to curb the unemployment in this area and in this province as a whole and the entire country. That was something that we were looking forward to as youth.
The IFP President Velenkusini Hlabisa has called on residents of Mapumulo in Ilembe, north of Durban in KwaZulu-Natal, to use the power of the vote to elect leaders of their choice. He was addressing IFP members and supporters at an election rally in the area yesterday.
Let us take our protest to the ballot box. When you arrive in the ballot box, use the power in your hand, your vote, to remove the government you have been protesting against for years and vote for the IFP. Once the IFP is in government, we will create jobs, we will end load shedding, we will end crime, we will be tough to criminals in our communities.
And finally, the people of Chad are voting for a new president today after 3 years of military transition under General Mahamat Dabi. He has been in power since the death of his father Idris Deby, who ruled the country for 3 decades. The BBC's Paul Inji reports.
The presidential election was due to be held 2 years ago, but the military authorities prolonged the transitional period. Despite an initial promise not to run in the next election, transitional leader Mahamat Deby is among the 10 candidates vying to be president. Some members of the opposition and civil society have called for a boycott of the polls, saying the process has been organized to solidify his stay in power. The results are expected to be released by the 21st of May, but the second round could be held in June if there is no clear winner in the first round.
Recapping the top story, Gauteng Premier Panyaza Lesufi says the provincial government and the city of Johannesburg will establish a joint committee which will ensure the implementation of the recommendations of the Gampepe Commission of Inquiry. For SAFM News, I am Anne Musa.
SAFM 104 to 107 nationwide.
My name is Songezo Zibi. I am the leader of Rise Mzansi. In this election, it is clearer than ever that we need new leaders. South Africa suffers from deep inequality, violent crime, and poverty. This is caused by politicians who have run out of ideas. We deserve a South Africa that is safe, prosperous, equal, and united. But only new political leaders can achieve this. And these leaders do not exist in the old parties. At Rise Mzansi, we have the team South Africans would want to see in cabinet. We don't make empty promises. We have a plan to govern better. It is time to vote for new leaders. Vote Rise Mzansi on the 29th of May.
This political election broadcast was brought to you in terms of the CASA regulation governing the election period. The views expressed in this political election broadcast are those of the political party and not of the SABC.
Nna lebitso la ka ke Bonolo Moagi Dibantswang ba re ke Miss B, Morara Miss T, Moagi D, the Bonnie B Bonbon. And we'll be now playing Kena on Mondays at 4:30. The day has changed, but the time slot hasn't. So if you're interested in news that's happening with us kids and our peers around the world, don't forget to tune in. See you there.
Hi guys, your favorite mom vlogger here, talking all things family entertainment with Deal or No Deal now on SABC2 weekdays at 6:30 p.m. Omalume is trying to make it onto the show and have his life changed quick. Amanda Malume. Mama and I are the #1 Mubango fans at 9 p.m. all week because the storylines stay hot. And my two little people can't wait for May when Raid the Cage kicks off with SABC2. See La Familia, keeping those family bonds strong. Until next time.
The Talking Point with Kathy Mosasana. Weekdays, 9 a.m. till midday.
I ask you and all the leaders of the world, would you act differently? Would you keep silent and do nothing?
The Talking Point with Kathy Mosasana. Weekdays, 9 a.m. till midday.
Integrity is doing the right thing when nobody is looking. And for me, nothing epitomizes this more than the lessons learned from a story that I read in my mid-20s, and it goes like this. There was young James who loved bass fishing in the nearby dam with his dad. And try as he might, this 10-year-old just couldn't land a bass. One night, both he and his dad were fishing in the dam, and he suddenly felt this tug on his rod. And he was so excited, "Dad, I think I have something." So his father helped him reel in the most magnificent bass. At that point, the father pushed back the cuff of his sleeve and said, "Son, I'm afraid you are going to have to throw this back." And he said, "But why, Dad?" The father said, "It is now 10 p.m. and bass season opens at 12 p.m. The son said, "But Dad, nobody will know. It's just the two of us here." And the father said, "You will know, son. It's you that will know." And so he sadly unhooked this fish, threw it back into the dam, and as it swished its tail and swam away, he thought to himself, "I'm never going to catch another fish like this." And he was right. He never did. But in his adult years as a civil engineer, the bass story always came back to him, particularly when he was asked to cut corners in his job as a civil engineer. And he always thought of the bass story, and that is integrity. Sometimes you learn a lesson that somehow carries you through life, and it is the simple word integrity that will set you apart from your peers.
Well, we can put that one on repeat over and over and over again. Yeah, no truer words have been spoken. Prem Govender is the chairperson of the South African Savings Institute Board. And values like integrity are the values that we need to be speaking more about, inculcating more in our society. It's 11 after 9 o'clock. Welcome to the Talking Point. I'm Kathy Mutlatlana. A pleasure to be with you on this Monday morning. I trust that you've had a good and a restful weekend. It is, of course, the countdown every week that comes by. We're more and more mindful of the fact that, we are about to just be on, we're really on the eve of an election, right? We've got 3 more weeks to go. And then we will be faced with that week where it comes down to decision time, election day on the 29th of May. So much of, I see, the news content is centering on elections. No surprises there. So we'll have the conversation too. There is something particularly that has come up that I think will make a good topic for discussion this morning. And I'll tell you about it in a moment. Coming up on the show today for our conversation conversation at 10 o'clock, we are going to be focusing on the election manifesto